the Star Party people just sent out a notice that they're trying to finalize things. Does everybody feel like it's going to happen this year? I'm not particularly worried about vaccine by then. I expect to have it by then for both of us. But do we all think it's still going to happen, or is it a sort of
I think it's a lot more likely to happen now that we have a vaccine than if we were still waiting on it. That being said, you know, there's still restrictions as far as the number of people they're admitting. You know, I personally think that even though a vaccine is available, it still puts a tremendous strain on the local medical facilities that are available if needed. I mean, the closest major one is Alpine, and that's not exactly a very, you know, large facility to begin with. Fortunately, the demographic for TSP is typically all over the age of 16 because vaccines won't be available for underage individuals for at least over a year. So the likelihood is very strong. The likelihood of some of us on this call going is less.
I plan to go.
Different. It's definitely going to be different this year. They've been very specific about the things that are changing. For instance, the age demographic, who they say stay home if you're this, if you have this condition, etc. It's going to pare down, and just a lot of the things that people go to enjoy that are going to be curtailed and simply not be there is going to pare down the overall size of it. So I expect it to be happening, just a whole lot smaller.
Well, did you notice that they're limiting attendance to 300 this year?
Yes.
I expect it to come in under that.
Mm-hmm. Especially since there's so many restrictions to the lodging and accommodations as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll sign up and go through the dance because it could be a lot of fun.
At the rate they're making the vaccine available, I figure it'll be about February 30.
Yeah, the thing
there's a lot of logistical problems getting it out. I mean, millions of doses all of a sudden through supply chains that were never established.
Well, let's also not forget that depending on when certain individuals can obtain the vaccine, you know, if you get the vaccine within a week or two before TSP, and it's one of those that requires a secondary or tertiary dose, you won't be fully vaccinated by TSP. Mm-hmm. So it's something else to consider.
So will most of the attendees be in Zoom, or will you get a fair number of YouTube people also?
Last month, we had approximately 16 to 18 YouTube attendees. Hoping we'll have more because of the interest last month and the fact that we've been drumming up more interest online. I do keep a track of the YouTube attendees and will field any questions that come in during your presentation, Tom.
Great, good. Thank you.
Are you able to tell? Are you able to tell who's joining from YouTube?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Are you able to tell the people's names that are joining from YouTube?
Yes, if they use their names, or sometimes, you know, they might use a name associated with email or whatnot. But yes, I can generally determine who's signed on.
So okay. Dawn, do you have eyes on the live stream now?
I'm just getting there.
Oh, okay. I started about 2 minutes ago.
Did you? Okay, it's not popping up, but let's see.
There's Joyce. Hi, Joyce, you on? Oh, there's Jim.
Yeah, looks like Jim to me.
You can't mean Eagle Mother. He never comes to the meetings. Terry, I am not seeing a live stream.
Okay, let me.
It says that, as you know, probably it says that it's live streaming in the upper left-hand corner of Zoom.
Well, in Zoom, yes, but the live stream link, including our home site on YouTube, does not show a live stream.
Let me see if I can pop it over to you in chat.
Okay.
It is streaming on YouTube itself.
What?
I see it on YouTube.
Okay, good, because I
It's just not on your site, I guess, if you have a window there or something.
I just opened up YouTube and did a search and it came up.
Yeah, you can even click on the upper left-hand corner of your Zoom screen on the down arrow for YouTube, and there's a streaming link you can copy. Oh, even view
There we
streaming.
go. Okay. It's actually not. So Terry,
Yes.
FYI, it's actually showing up under your name again, not the club.
Okay.
So if someone goes to the Austin Astro YouTube site, they will not necessarily, if they search for us, then yes. But if they actually go to our YouTube site, they will not find it.
Okay. I needed to pick the different channel when I started it. So I could
Somebody's
either.
got music or something blaring in the microphone.
If someone goes to the Austin Astro YouTube site, they will not necessarily.
Well, I'm hearing the YouTube channel in the background. It's got about a 5 or 10 second delay.
Yeah, it'll be delayed.
If you're not
Yeah.
speaking, please mute your speaker. Or we'll do it for you.
Yeah, do it. Do it, Dawn, do it. Don't make me mute everybody.
Okay, well, my option is to stop that stream and start it again, or just let it run and hope people search. Do we, whoever is looking at YouTube right now, can you see if how many users might be viewing?
2 right now.
Yeah.
How many?
2.
Okay.
What is it currently under if I were to go searching for it? Because Austin Astro is only showing the one
Terry
for a month.
Phillips' personal YouTube.
It's just Terry Phillips?
Well,
Okay.
it's a YouTube channel.
Go to the upper left-hand corner of Zoom, and next to the word live YouTube, if you click on the pull down, there's an option to view there.
Hey guys, I just did an Austin Astronomical Society search on YouTube and it came up.
Yes, it will, because he's labeled that the title of the video. But if you go to Austin Astro's YouTube page, it does not show as live streaming. That's the only difference.
Guys, I just did an Austin Astronomical Society search on YouTube.
Hold on, let me shut myself up.
Okay,
I'm going to go ahead, Terry, and mute everyone, and then
go ahead.
you can mute accordingly. Yes, he's labeled that the title of the.
Okay. I guess we need to get started here. Dawn, if you want to, you could shoot an explanatory email out. I'm not sure how to address it even. I think we're just going to have to proceed on what we've got. And
It's
fix it
okay.
next time.
I'll do a post to Facebook at the very least and give folks an update
Okay.
that they can follow.
Okay. Thanks, Dawn. Okay. So yeah, we're a little bit over here, so let's go ahead and get started. And we've had the minutes from our November meeting up. We don't have December meeting, December GA meeting, so there are no minutes there. I'll leave these up for a couple of more minutes here. Come over to the side and just take a peek at the agenda here. So we'll have our officers reports, work through that pretty quickly. About 3 points of quick business to take care of. And then Brian's going to do a short presentation on hydrogen alpha, observing the sun in hydrogen alpha. And then we'll go to our main presentation. We have Tom Field with us tonight, and he's going to be talking to us in detail about spectroscopy. And we'll throw an open there for anybody having any outstanding questions if they want to add it. So we would like to know if we have any new members tonight to welcome you. So if there's anybody who's joining us for the first time, could you let yourself be known? Or
So we're new. This is Mike and Natalie Voss.
Hello.
hi, Mike, and hi, Natalie. So are you new to Austin or just new to the club?
Yeah, we're out near Dripping Springs. So we're like in High Point, which is just behind Volterra.
Okay. So how are your skies out there?
It's good.
Pretty good. We're in a dark sky community, so there are some restrictions. So it's been pretty good.
Okay. Well, welcome to the club. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Charles and Anya and Stefania. She's 3 years old.
Hello, welcome. Anybody else? Oh, hello, Tim. I had you covered up. Okay. All right.
Terry, I believe we may have one more new member listening tonight. I don't know if we can hear her or not. Jan Boza, can you hear us? Looks like it's trying to connect, but I don't see her on quite yet. I sent her the link.
Okay. So, Tim, I'm going to make you another co-host if you want to watch the waiting room for me, if you wouldn't mind. We've currently got 33 in the main here. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So hopefully most everybody has been on, has had a chance to read the minutes now. So we don't really have a voting mechanism anymore. So we'll just say that unless anybody has any questions or concerns about the minutes, that we'll say they were approved and we'll move on. Okay. So we'll start off with reports, and Mike, we'll start with the Vice President's report.
Okay. Can we do a screen share?
Sure. You should have the co-host, so you should be able to start it.
Okay. So the meeting agenda, the plans for the rest of the year, they've been on the website and we circulate them and they were mailed out. But the other day I had a chance to reach out to Precision Camera and Video and ask them if they would consider putting on a class only for us. Working out the details, but we're looking at a 4-hour class, maybe 6 until 10 or 6:30 to 10:30, starting with the crescent moon, which will set, and then working with Orion and other areas of the sky. We bring our telescopes to a useful darkish site here in the city. They bring the cameras and the instructors. And the cost will be about the same as for their studio glamour training, about $79 to $129 for the 4-hour session. Given the COVID restrictions, of course, it'll probably be limited to 10 people and social distancing and so on and so forth. But I don't know how to take a picture through a telescope. I have put online a couple of snapshots that I took of the moon. It's kind of hard to miss. And it only took about 3 or 4 or 5 hours over 3 to 5 nights to get each one. The first with the iPhone 5 and then the iPhone 11. And it just was not very successful beyond that. I just have no hopes of getting any kind of a photograph of, Jupiter, Orion Nebula or whatever. So I reached out to Precision Camera because they do classes here. And what they provide that we have not really had an opportunity to benefit from here is performance-based training, we've had some good presentations on astrophotography from people, but they were not training sessions. So that's what this will be. We bring our telescopes, they bring the cameras, we work together for 4 hours, and the result will be a publishable photograph of the crescent moon and a deep sky object. So we'll try to work this out. I'll start with the executive committee in February and discuss the details, and then get back with Precision Camera.
Are we talking about DSLR cameras or cell phone cameras or?
Well, they're talking about real cameras, definitely not the cell phones. I mean, you know, if you want to do that, I guess we could, but that was my failure point. I mean, the thing doesn't fit in the XYZ anymore. The 11 is too big. The 11 fights me. It makes decisions I don't want it to make. And you know, it's just a pain in the neck. And it's not a real camera.
So if we have our own camera, can we work with
We
that?
have to work all that out, Greg. I don't know. I mean, they're going to bring cameras. I mean, if you have your own camera, obviously you can bring your own camera. You have to be forbidden from bringing your camera.
Okay, because I just purchased this last week a Canon Rebel T3i.
I don't know what that means. I know what a Canon is.
Great starter camera.
I've been told it's like I've been told it's the best starter camera for deep sky astrophotography.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Excellent.
Okay. All right. So we'll talk more about this in February then.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for looking at that. Okay. Anything about our upcoming schedule of speakers?
Nothing new.
Okay.
Terry, did you mean
on the website?
Well, Terry, did you mean we'll talk about it in the ECE meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes. Okay. So let me take my screen back here and. Okay, Joyce, anything to share about outreach at this time?
Not really. We did not do a star party at Pedernales Falls in December, and everything is just on hold at all locations at this point until things get better.
Okay, thanks. And Tim, member services, I think it's probably in the same boat.
Probably the shortest report I'll ever make. No comment.
Okay, I put a line item down below about talking about the fact that we're going to need to replace you or discuss replacing you pretty soon. We can do that now or wait till we get down there.
Up to you.
Okay. All right, let's just save it and we'll move on to equipment chair, which Brian.
Okay, as I mentioned in the EC moving, EC meeting, we continue to work on the observatory out at Pedernales, which Greg has provided us with a nice picture of what the lights look like earlier, just kind of messing around, taking a look at it. And we will be out there working on it again tomorrow. We have loaned out most of the equipment in the loaner program, and there's a few things I need to start looking into getting back, but otherwise things are going along pretty straight, and I've gotten a lot of pleasant texts and a lot of good feedback from people who have borrowed scopes.
Okay, that's it.
That's pretty much it for now. The big focus is really getting the observatory done.
Well, I'm still waiting for you guys to let me know when the painting party is so I can show up with a roller or something. So
Exactly, and we're going to get that squared away when a combination of the weather and when we can get people for sure committed, because that's one of those things we want to open the floodgates, get it painted, get it done. But we're getting down to a lot of the technical side of it. I will tell you that the much of the construction walls, any of that has been taken care of, and it's down to wiring up the red lights, the low voltage stuff, details, temperature controls, where we're going to put what, et cetera, et cetera.
And there's there's 2.5 painting rollers out there already waiting.
Exactly, 2.5 painting rollers, yes.
Okay, I won't even ask how that works, but great.
There may have been a coyote involved.
Ah, well, that might explain it. Okay. Dawn, anything for Alcor?
Absolutely. Okay. So for those of you that had an opportunity at one point in time last month to observe the Great Conjunction, there is a special astronomical observing challenge and award. That information is actually listed on the homepage of the Astronomical League website at astroleague.org. And all that requires is to provide an image or sketch of the objects, some basic information, and especially if you happen to do any outreach surrounding it. So for instance, about a week or so prior, I helped do some outreach on a virtual star party with the Girl Scouts of Central Texas. So if you did anything of that nature, you can definitely submit for this certificate. Also, let me share my screen real quick. Let's see here. If you're just a big fan of certificates and you just really feel like you want one for this, but you don't want to bother sketching it out, you can actually go online and print off your very own "I saw the Great Conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter" and insert your observing name and your location and print that out at your own discretion. So
I did that.
Fun little thing. You did that, Jamie?
Yes.
Awesome. I love it. See, if you viewed it in any capacity and you were on this call, that's 37 people who had gotten certificates. So I think that's great. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't get credit for having gone out and watched it at any point in time. Most likely probably not on the 21st though, because I know as myself, you probably did not get a very long or good view of it because it was cloudy, thanks to all those folks that were buying telescopes for their families for Christmas. Another observing program to be made aware of that's coming up, and this is done periodically with the Astro League, just like the conjunction, is a special NASA observing challenge for the landing of the Perseverance rover. So it's something to go online, take a look at the information, get yourself ready. So that is going to require some sketching, possibly an outreach event. A deadline submission for that is going to be March 18th. So it's something like they like to post ahead of time to let folks know about what is on the horizon. To prepare for these programs, because some of these programs and specialty challenges do require a little bit of ahead of time preparation, file making, and so forth. And other than that, since we are going to be talking a little bit about some solar activities tonight, some spectroscopy, I thought it was also important to highlight some programs that you may or may not know about, because as those of you know, we live in Texas. We are in winter. The weather could be perfectly clear and crisp, or it could be absolute crap. And that's mostly during the evenings. But if for some reason during the daytime you have some clear skies, we actually have had some pretty phenomenal solar activity lately as we're starting that sort of uptick towards that solar maximum that we're hoping to reach, especially by 2024 for the eclipse. So there are things like just basic sunspot observers award. There's occasionally a solar eclipse award if it's available. There's an entire program on stellar evolution you could take part in. If you are looking for something more long-term, there is an entire NLEMA observing program that one of our members out of all of our members has done once. And that does require actually observing the sun every day over the course of a year. So that's a little bit more extensive. But if you're looking for some good programs to do during the daytime, definitely check out the Astronomical League website and take a look at their solar offerings. In most cases, these do not require very expensive solar filters. It's very easy to make a stopper with either a piece of cardboard and some beta film or solar film, or in some ways working with the equipment you have. And you're always welcome to reach out to me if you want assistance with that. I do have a little bit of experience, and we do have other folks that are available to help you with that as well. But that's all I have right now from your Alcor.
Okay, thank you, Don.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that'll bring us down to just regular business. One thing we need to bring up, and Joyce, you may help me out with what the procedures are here, but it's time again to form a nominating committee to help us select a new set of officers for the next term, which this term runs through May, I believe. So,
correct. Well, the nominating committee can have 2 members of the EC and then 1 member who is not on the EC.
Okay, and we're supposed to form the committee this month, or just look for the committee this month? And
It's supposed to be formed in January so that they can be working, and then in March, the slate has to be announced. We're going to have to figure out how to deal with it. Basically, maybe it'll be the same way as we did last year, because if we're still not at that point, and that's probably the case, having actual meetings, then the voting is, well, we're going to have to figure out how we can vote or how we can go forward.
okay. So that means that we're basically putting out an invitation tonight for anybody in the club that would like to participate on the nominating committee to have, a hand in helping us identify candidates and line them up and get them ready for an election. If you'd like to run for an office, then we will publish who the nominating committees are, I guess, at the end of this month, and you can contact any of them to let them know about your interest. So we'll like I said, anybody who wants to participate, let us know. We may reach out to some people and ask, but we'll get the nominating committee formed this month and let them do their thing. It's hard to believe it's already time for that, but years go by quickly sometimes in some perspectives. Okay.
We're redshifted tonight.
What's redshifted?
Yeah, Joyce and I.
Oh, well, you're a little bit pink. I'm not quite sure. So, but talking about somebody who is planning to be moving away from us, we got Tim here, who's going to blue shift up to the Pacific Northwest. I'm not sure exactly where, which means he's going to have to step out of the role of member services chair, and we need to have somebody take on that role after he leaves. Tim, would you spend a few minutes just talking about the role?
Sure. Well, it's the role this last year has been minimal, just because we haven't been able to get together for any star parties. Just actually the entire, at least this entire EC year. But assuming that ends sometime and that we're able to get back together, then there are really three major aspects to member services. One is that you will be welcoming, keeping track of new members and making sure that they're taken care of, along with outreach. And then secondly, and probably most significantly, you would plan this private star parties and essentially make sure that their membership's notified properly of it and procedures for it, and organize some special ones throughout the year, such as we have what we call a Central Texas Star Party, which often is 2 days over a weekend. And also to keep members, and we have other things like the Messier Marathon has been one of the best fun things we've had in previous years, which we weren't able to do last year. And then in addition to that, we have our Deep Sky observing site, which is where we'd hold the private star parties, but it's also available to members on an individual basis, and you kind of monitor and help with that. Our kind members who have allowed us to use their ranch ask for some special procedures to be followed, which member services chairs and responsible for making sure it does happen. And plan two, the second thing, other than the star parties, that's most important and certainly been important to me over the years. This is the 6th time that I've done this, stretched out over the life of the whole committee. And we had various names over the time, but the practical astronomy portion, which is essentially was an hour before our general meetings every month, in which we had hands-on, usually demonstrations. I know Ron Carmen's given quite a few. A lot of our members do, and it's generally given by members, not part of the General Assembly. And it's a really good time for people to get together and learn something about a specific subject, and ask questions. It's very informal and usually a lot smaller than the General Assembly. So it's a good time. We need to start those again, and they can be turned into training sessions. In the past, they have been training sessions at times. One thing we have not done, which we've talked about and tried to get going before all this started, was at times having some of the practical astronomy meetings essentially with a night component. We've never had that before, where we've gone out and observed afterwards, and possibly you might want to use our private Star Party Ranch, Bad Wolf Ranch, for that. Those are the main things that you do as member services chair. The other thing that we've been unsuccessful with in past years that I hope will become successful is that every chair really should try to form a committee and get other people involved working with them. It improves the program, and it makes it, when there's really programs going, it makes it lighter load on the chair himself. But more importantly, it gives different perspectives to what the membership needs. And that's it. I mean, generally, you need to find out what the membership needs and try to give it to them. So I just want to thank you all for the many times that I've gotten to do this. And this last one's been pretty boring, but it certainly has not been demanding. So that's it, Terry.
Okay, thanks, Tim. And
any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Okay, well, if anybody thinks that role sounds interesting to them, please let us know. And otherwise, we're going to be coming out and searching for someone to take it. Tim, certainly want to thank you for all the years that you've been doing that, and you've done a lot more than that for the club. Been president for a number of years, off and on. We're really going to miss you, and you're really irreplaceable. But we're really sad to see you go. But we understand why you have to do it.
Well, thank you, Terry. But admit the truth, you're really going to miss Cass more.
Well, okay.
Oh,
yeah, we're all pissed because you're taking Cass away from us.
No cookies out at the star parties anymore.
Yeah. Okay. So last little tidbit of business, unless somebody has a question about some other things, is as our observatory storage facility is coming together at Pedernales, it occurred to us that we're going to need to name this facility at some point. Similar, we had at Canyon of the Eagle, or the observatory was Eagle Eye Observatory, and so we need a designator for this observatory. And there may be some technicalities about setting up a name for it. We think we can probably just call it whatever we feel like, but we do have to kind of coordinate it with Pedernales. And so that's a little process we're working through. And Don has picked out what I think is an excellent name, but we also think we should get maybe some more input. So we're thinking about possibly throwing it open to the membership to maybe suggest some names too. We're still waiting on feedback from Pedernales. So I think by our next meeting, if we want to open it up, we'll let you guys know about it. But you might be thinking about it. Dawn, you want to share what we've come up with at this point?
Sure. As we've been working out there, the idea of a name has definitely come up to me several times, and wanting it to be obviously something astronomical in nature, but also something in relation to the location itself. So Eagle Eye Observatory out of Canyon of the Eagles was specifically due to the eagles that nest in the area. So it was indicative to the region. So my thought, to keep in line with Pedernales Falls State Park, is Falling Star Observatory.
Oh, I think that's a pretty apropos name. It's
I think it's a little bit better, though. I don't want to be, hammering down on people, but Connex Henge Observatory would not be my first pick.
Just kidding.
Too many of us didn't know what a connex was before this. So
That's true. Connex sounds it's a lot smoother off the tongue than, shipping container observatory.
Yeah.
I think Connex henge would be great if we were actually literally making a henge out of a whole bunch of connexes. But no, I thought the name sounded particularly unique, especially since in my research, I have not found any observatory, at least online with any sort of online presence, named Falling Star Observatory. So that was my pitch. That was my idea.
If we ultimately build a hinge of them out there, each one's going to need an individual name anyway. So
you know what? If we build a henge out there, I can assure you I will not be working on the others. I think this is my first and last Connex observatory.
Okay. All right. Is there?
Terry just went quiet, but I like Falling Star also, Don.
Well, thank you, Ron.
Somebody's muting me, I think, or I'm muting myself. Am I?
I did that, Terry. I was trying to admit someone and muted you by accident. Sorry.
No problem. So I just posed the question. That's the end of our regular business. Unless somebody else has a question or concern that they'd like to bring up, we can do that now. Hearing nothing. I learned that a couple of nights ago. Hearing nothing. We'll turn our attention to our presentations, and we'll start off with Brian, and he's going to tell us why hydrogen alpha is an awesome way to view the sun. Yes, it's you, Brian. You're on mute. Okay. I'm trying to ask him to unmute.
I just unmuted him.
Plug your mic in, Brian.
Hmm. Nope.
Looks like operator error to me.
Hello?
There you are.
Hello? It had gone off for whatever reason. I didn't know it had shut down. Okay,
Inactivity
how's
time.
everybody doing tonight? Terry, if I need a feedback or anything, could you be my verbal and optical feedback guy?
Sure.
Okay, Terry, can I have the screen? Let's go ahead and do a share because, hi, everybody. I'm Brian Lippincott. I'm your equipment chair. I'm going to go ahead and get out of this jacket. It was a little chilly in this shop tonight, and I'm going to be moving around some for part of this talk. That's the reason I got this miserable headset that I'm still trying to learn how to use, apparently. But for now, we're going to start off with what we can see on the screen. So
you can take the screen anytime you want to, Brian.
Okay, let me remember how to do this. I click on share
screen at the
and
bottom.
What
yep.
we want is, let's try that. And share. All right, cool. All right, so we got share screen. Let me go ahead and minimize that. It tells me that my connection is unstable, so nothing would shock me. So what we want to talk about tonight is the joy, happiness, and excitement of holy cow, hydrogen alpha. I didn't know I could see the sun this way, unquote. Here's the thing with hydrogen alpha. When we look at the sun, we can't look directly at it. And by and large, most of us go ahead and we decide to look at the sun and go, oh, I can get this inexpensive filter and build it, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not covering those filters tonight, but I did want to mention those are a pretty obvious and easy way to go about it. I've been building them for a while, and they're very useful, especially when you've got things like sunspots going down. So here's the thing with filters. When you're looking at the visual spectra, you've got a whole section there. Can everybody see my little mousy thingy wiggling okay?
No, Brian, I'm seeing a Jet Propulsion Laboratory set of pictures of Mars landers.
Okay, I have to share something else then. My bad. Hang on, let me go back to Zoom. Come on, wakey, wakey. Okay.
Nice picture of the red spot on Jupiter.
Okay, so I guess you can't just go open stuff or whatever anytime you want. So I'll have to do a little switching around. How about this share? Okay, can you see that? It says Optilong L Pro filter, and you should be able to see my mouse. We're moving around.
Yep, we got it.
Okay, the only reason I'm going through that is so that I can make the point that over here where I'm pointing between 400 and 700, for those who aren't familiar with it, that's pretty much our visual optical spectra. And most things fall within there. So when somebody says, I got a filter that takes, this out and that out and leaves this much, you can see what I'm pointing to here. This is a little wider. This is a little wider. Okay, so you've got what is functionally a wider band filter there. Okay, so if I come over here and show you a different filter, what filter can you see now? Did anything change on my screen?
You got one tall red spike, a skinny spike.
Thank you. Okay, excellent. Good. So it is, when I get rid of that picture, it is popping up what I wanted to put up there. And for speed, I'm just going to go ahead and put I'm going to put a 15-minute timer on, so you will hear that go off. All right. When somebody says that's a narrow band filter, you're talking about a very small spike, notably where I'm pointing between 400 and 700. That's our visible spectrum between there and there. And right here around 650, 656 is that little tiny narrow skinny thing we call hydrogen alpha. Okay, that's the one I wanted to talk about tonight, was hydrogen alpha. And well, how do I see things in hydrogen alpha? And why would I want to? Here's why you'd want to. Here's another example. This is a Bader 7 nanometer hydrogen alpha. This is for CCD uses.
Screen hasn't changed yet, Brian.
My screen hasn't changed. Has it caught up yet?
Still see the Optilong filter.
Okay. It could be that I have to get rid of that one. Try it now. Did it change? Oh.
Not yet.
Nope.
Hey, that's interesting. It's telling me that my screen share. There we go. How's that?
Not yet.
Okay. It just looks like it's dropped my stuff completely. I am no longer sharing at this point, Terry.
Alrighty.
What can you see on me again? What can you see on my screen? Let me go up to share. Let me go to this right here. Let's try that. Okay. Can you all see that?
See your desktop.
Yeah, my desktop. Okay, but you can't see the
mouse arrow is pointing to a continuous spectrum in the upper left.
comparison solar spectrum right here.
Move your mouse. Not seeing your mouse move.
Interesting. That's annoying. Well, I'll tell you what, we won't worry about that so much. And instead, let's try to pull up a different image. Images that can be useful for what we're talking about. Okay, do you have a screen image now?
Still seeing your desktop.
We're looking at a folder right now.
How about now?
There we go. We have a solar image.
Okay, I think I have an idea how to go between pictures now, but it looks like I have to tell it to share. Okay, so here's the thing with hydrogen alpha. When you look at, can you see my mouse moving?
Yes.
Okay, when you look at white light, you notice the difference between the photosphere and the chromosphere. This photosphere is what you're going to see in your white light. And again, this is a sunspot. I don't know all the names of all the small details of a sunspot. I have to get an image up there for it. But when you see it, notice it's smooth. You may or may not see some details on it depending upon the level of your filter and what kind of day it is. But it appears in this image to be, where I'm pointing up here, a smaller diameter because it's actually, for lack of a better term, it's smaller and inside of the chromosphere. And over here, you got texture. You've got, wow, that's a sunspot. You've got this texture and you've got these prominences all around the edge. That's what you get with hydrogen alpha. That's why we do it. That's why it's awesome. So the hydrogen alpha, since screen sharing is going to be kind of a pain for me to do this, I'll try to go between one and another. I'm going to go over some of the equipment and essentially just a real quick. There we go. Okay, do you see a picture of something that has red arrows?
No.
Just on your desktop. We're not seeing the actual picture.
Man, that is frustrating. Okay, and new share. Try that. How about now?
No.
Any change?
No.
You can see the mouse moving, but no change in the picture.
Interesting. I wonder
So
why that is.
Brian, is one of your options to turn on show your entire screen? I mean, this looks like your desktop, but it looks like you're bringing up individual pictures in their own separate window that it's wanting to share one window at a time.
Got it. How does this look?
That looks good. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have what? A picture of my desktop or a picture of something that looks like a theoretical diagram?
This is the Etalon diagram.
Excellent. Etalon diagram. Okay, cool. I'm going to get through this hard part. Probably should have used a PowerPoint, but I wanted to avoid that because this part is essentially what fascinated me about this. I'm going, okay, hydrogen alpha. How does it work? How does it do what it does? It's not just a filter, obviously. Well, the theory is based on a thing called a Fabry-Perot-Etalon, and it works on essentially the idea that light comes in, and in this case, we got a piece of glass with two surfaces, and these two particular surfaces are made to, this glass is of a light, incidence of light. Okay, so this kind of like index of refraction, I guess you'd call it an index of refraction. So this puppy enters, and you're going to have some of this bent very slightly off the path that it came off of, which is what happens when you have an index of refraction. Some of that light is going to escape out the other surface, and some of it is going to bounce back, and some more is going to escape out this surface under R1, and some of it's going to bounce back to T2. And so an Etalon essentially peels away a lot of the light by the bounce. It's bouncing it, and the index of refraction is causing some of the light to be peeled off every time it bounces. And after so many bounces, a certain number of the photons get through, so you get this peeled down light, but it's not filtered per se. And so what it lets through, you get more of the full spectrum coming through, and now you've got something that you can work with to see more of the details on it. So we'll call up a quick example here of the type of equipment that you'll have. If this one comes up, do we have an image showing single and double stacks?
Yes.
Okay, this image is the indication between, well, I've done a single stack, which means I've put one Etalon in line, and it's taken X amount of the light down, and a double stack narrows it down just a little bit. It's a little bit more narrow, and that causes a little bit more contrast. I have an example here. Here's another one. Features on the sun. Here we go. The difference between calcium K, which is a little higher contrast than a standard white light, versus the chromosphere, which is your hydrogen alpha version that you see, and these things that are the dark ones. We often see these when we're out messing with one of my hydrogen alpha scopes, called the prominences. Well, they're little sideways curls like this that you can see that are a darker color. And these plages or plages, that's a French word. I can't remember what it means specifically, but these are the whiter, lighter areas that spread out over the surface of the chromosphere. And there's a tremendous temperature differential between a lot of these, and that's part of why it is they show up the way they do, because it changes the light wave. Here's another example. This is what you've got in a white light filter, and this is probably a slightly bigger telescope. It almost looks like you can see a little depth to the curvature in that white light filter in the area around what is a sunspot here. Whereas this, you can definitely see the depth, in addition to a lot of the surface right here on the edge and a lot of the surface detail. You can see the prominences on the edge. So it actually has more of a 3D effect, which is the best way to describe it. When I get to the equipment portion of this here in a second, things will make a little bit more sense. Early versions were the Coronado PST, or Personal Solar Telescope. It brought a telescope available that could see in hydrogen alpha to the general public for about $500. So anybody could afford one. And one of the first ones I ever looked through, and here's a breakdown of it, is a Corona PST. And this was, the club had probably had it for a couple of years before I started here. And it's got a brass tube. It's only 40 millimeters. The Etalon and the tuning ring is in here. The thing that you do with an Etalon, by the way, is you slightly tilt it off to allow a slight shift in the amount of light that passes through. So if you've got two surfaces and they're directly parallel with each other and you shift them slightly off, a different amount of light in a slightly shifted wavelength will pass through or not pass through. That's one of the ways that you can tune an Etalon. Then, of course, you've got several filters. You've got an ultraviolet IR filter. In this case, it sits right up here where I'm pointing to. And then up here, because this is in German, you have a 5 millimeter blocking filter that is pronounced in a completely different way. And these blocking filters are primarily about removing all of the light that isn't going to help you see the contrast to the best. Red tends to be one of the better ways. So you've got that 5 millimeter blocking filter that helps block you got your UV and IR, but there's another section that kind of makes the tint look more red because our eyes can see the red with a little greater contrast. And then you got the cover over it. And this one has a rather unusual focuser that operates at 45 degrees. So it's actually a prism. And the light enters here, bounces off the back. So it's through this surface, bounces off of this surface, down to this surface, and straight up. So when you adjust the thing in a if this is your square and you're adjusting it at 45 degrees, it enables it to move that prism to control the focal length of it so that you get a focus on this. So it's a little bit of a wonky way to go about it, but they were able to essentially build a box with a tube sticking out of it and an optic on it. And if I could pull up one more here. This is a PST diagram where someone drew it, if you can see it. It's a basic telescope theory can be established from basic Coronado. So here's your objective. Your light comes in at a focus. It goes through the Etalon here, which enables you to tune it. It's going to pare that light down, and it's going to enable you to tune it by either tilting it a little or changing the distance between the two pieces of glass that make up the Etalon, if it's a reflecting type, or the single piece of glass, if it's I forgot what the name of the other one is, but it's got a French name on it. And then you've got a corrector right here, the plano convex, because you want the light to go through the Etalons parallel. So the light's coming in a cone, it gets straightened out, it runs through the Etalon, it does its business, gets usually tilt tuned, it gets re-put back into a cone, and then there it gets turned 45 degrees so that it can go to the eyepiece and you can view it. Now one more, near and dear to my heart, I'm going to put this one up here because these guys taught me the most. This is a sample of a different way of doing the same job. You've got your objective lens, and this shows your light path in through the objective lens. Your concave lens turns that light path parallel again. Once it goes through the Etalon, which is this whole section, the Etalon in this case is two pieces of glass. I believe they have different indices of refraction. And then you have a convex lens, which refocuses the light down into that cone. And then here in the back, where the diagonal would normally be on a standard refractor, you've got an entrance that's not labeled on here, but that one is your IR filter. It looks kind of a light bluish color. And then you have two filters right here before entering the eyepiece. And those two pieces that are stacked on top of each other, I believe one of them is an ultraviolet, and the other one, the last one, is the reddish tint, which gives you the reddish tint view that you would see on this particular design telescope. Now, what makes this telescope different, and I'm only going to show you this one so that I can show you the real equipment, which is far more fun. This one, you see this area that's around it where it's gone through this lens and it exits through this lens? Well, there's not something tilting in here. This area around this is filled with air, and air is forced into there using a compressor. Down here where my arrow is moving up and down, you screw that in and it compresses air in through that empty space. And by compressing the air in, you put more molecules in there tighter, and you use the Doppler effect to shift the light and how it passes through. And that is how this particular telescope is tuned. It's not tilt tuned, it's what's called pressure tuned. So the Etalon doesn't actually physically move. It can be made solid, it doesn't get flexed, it doesn't get moved or anything of that nature. It doesn't have pressure put in the middle of it. It is able to stay flat and have more air pushed around it in order to shift the what do you call it, the light wave just a little bit. This happens to be a Lunt. It's very, very similar. I think it's an LS60 Lunt, manufactured by Lunt. And just a quick brief history on that. Coronado was a little company who said, hey, we can build these telescopes that can look at the sun. And I believe it was Meade purchased Coronado. Am I correct on that, Terry? Was it Meade who bought them?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
Meade purchased Coronado, and the man who worked in there, Andy Lunt, said, that's cool, but I can do my own thing. So he started his own company called Lunt and took off on his own explorations of how to build a better solar scope, and they are based in Arizona, where they know a thing or two about bright sun. So let me see if there's anything else on here that is useful for me to show you before we get on here. Oh yeah, let's go through this real quick. All righty. That's the safety manual, my bad. Okay, I had one. Here we go. Okay, I give credit to Sky and Tel. I copy pasted so they get the credit on this. This is a guide you can find online, Guide to Hydrogen Alpha Sun. This man is using a Coronado, one of the newer Coronados. Have I run completely out of time, Terry?
Well, it's probably time to wrap it up. So it'll take a couple of minutes.
All righty. Well, much as I would love to show you more of how this works, what do you say we get down to the real example? So Terry, how do I stop the share and get my camera back?
I think you have stopped it. Okay. Looks like it.
So without further ado, I'm going to show you the pretty stuff that's here. Our club owns two. Terry?
Yes. You've got
my
a
camera back on?
Yeah, we've got your camera. They've kind of shrunk the picture down, at least on mine. It says you have a low network bandwidth right now. But anyway, we can see you.
Figures. All righty. Well, I'm going to move a couple things up closer to us. So our club has one of these PSTs, which I have gone, we found where it was for a long period of time. I'll bring it up closer to the camera. This is a PST, Coronado PST. And like I said, 40 millimeters, and I put it on an alt-as mount. And this is not part of the loaner scope program, but when we start gathering, this is what one looks like. So this is the size approximately that it is. You're looking at about 18 inches long max, and you just put it on an alt-as. It has a basic optical type finder on it, and you use regular eyepieces on it. Nothing special about that. And you really want to use not too much zoom. Most of these, I don't try to zoom things particularly large, so I never go in much closer than about, I don't know, about a 9 millimeter eyepiece, and you get a really good view of the sun with that. But that is a PST, and it's really not terribly heavy. I just put some dovetails on it to make it more universal. Oftentimes these are piggybacked on something else that you could put it on a much larger telescope, cover up the front of that scope, maybe put a white light filter on it. The club also owns a Coronado 90 millimeter. This is a good bit more expensive piece of hardware. As you can see, it is, here's for scale. This is how big it is. It has a Soul Ranger, which is what you use for a finder. This guy uses a pretty standard arrangement here for the diagonal that's on it. The 25 millimeter is a good part of what I use on it. But in order to adjust the etalon, so you can go from light surface to, it's kind of like a 3D effect is the best way to describe it, which you don't get with any other telescope. You have an extra control, and in this case, it's this lever called a rich field tuner. And what it's doing is it's shifting the etalon, so you see the surface of the sun and all of the little details on it. But as you shift it, you're going farther around the sphere until you can see the prominences, so more details begin to come into view, or you can tune it back the other way. But the rich field tuner on this one, it offers you less of a red view, more of kind of a white view, but it'll give you a bigger view because of its size. And we have this on an equatorial mount so that, you know, you point it and you could actually do a little bit of solar photography with this. Additionally, you can put different filters in there to tint it, just regular optical filters right underneath the eyepiece to tint it the way you want to. Also belongs to the club. I don't know how many years we've had it, but I've gone through and done the software upgrade about a year and a half ago, and we usually take both of these scopes out for our weather fests and for anything that we do during the day when we're doing some observing there. But we have access to these. So when you come to our public star parties, for sure, they'll be out at the observatory, and we're hopefully going to get some use in the future. This is one of my favorite things on the whole world. This is a Lunt. Took me a long time to pull everything together on this, but the short and fast story on it is it's only 50 millimeters. It's not a huge telescope. This one happens to be on a motorized mount, so I can move him around, make him do whatever I want him to do this way. I happen to use an automatic tracking mount that came out a couple of years ago, and it's very, very simple, but you could just as easily put it on that same mount as that Coronado and just point it around, because that's what I did. I like a shield, so when I'm looking in the eyepiece, I'm not getting the sun glare at me. So that's one of the first and foremost things that I always do is put some kind of a shield. I haven't put it on these others. This is a pressure tuner. You turn this pressure tuner and it forces air up inside. The etalon is actually inside the telescope. And since I wanted higher contrast, I waited and watched until I managed to get my hands on a double stack, which you just screw onto the front, and it increases your contrast tremendously. Then you got your basic focuser arrangement, and I'm a big fan of making something shiny on the outside, like this, that you strap around the telescope, and you put something dark on the inside and fuzzy, and that way you got a head covering, and you can work functionally in the dark because there's a lot more details that you can see when you're not fighting against the sun to look through an eyepiece, because you do this work outside when you're not dark sky adapted. It's all bright. So after putting it all together, this is very much a grab and go rig. Pros and cons. I'll keep that short and simple. The pros, you're going to see the sun like you've never seen it before. I'm serious. It's very exciting. And if you get out, when we start doing star parties and things again, get out, get a chance, look through a hydrogen alpha scope. They're the best. They're absolutely the best. You can see more. You put it on a good tracking mount. They'll stay on the sun all day long. The cons, you have just spent more money for a telescope that can look at one star and only one star.
Brian, we have
So
a question.
If you really like looking at the sun, that's the thing.
We have a question, Brian.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. From Stuart Kumar. Brian, during the wide field, we should capture more details, including H alpha. So is there a specific reason why we don't see these details when in wide field? I think it means wide bandpass. Why don't we see the features that you're seeing with the narrow bandpass?
Oh, I see what you're talking about.
Because the data's in there. I guess what he's thinking is the data's in there. Why don't we see it? Yeah.
I think because the data, for lack of a better way of putting it, it's caught up in the noise. There's too much data. Yeah. You notice that was a very, very thin little spike of 656 nanometers is where you find your hydrogen alpha. There literally is an atomic theory reason, and I didn't get a chance to go through that, and I'm not the best person to explain it, but there is an atomic theory reason, because what you're looking at is one of the dark emission lines. If you were to look at the full spectra, you'll see the dark emission lines that are specifically for hydrogen. You're looking at the hydrogen alpha is one of those emission lines. I think Tom's going to be able to shed a skosh more light on that, because that's what his software looks at. But the short answer is I believe it's lost in the noise. So that's part of why hydrogen alpha, when you look at it in that spectra and you're making very, very subtle shifts. I can tell you that the wavelengths that you look at when you've got a single stack will be around 1 nanometer. It's where it settles right in there, or maybe a little less, maybe 0.9 nanometers. When you double stack, that shortens to 0.5 nanometers. So you're in a much smaller section of the range, and it's much more precise. And that, to me, is the reason why the contrast is so much higher, because like so many things in astronomy, this is all about contrast. Contrast is what makes the world go around for us.
Thank you, Brian. I wanted to apologize for mispronouncing the gentleman's name. I read too fast. It's Satwant Kumar.
Actually, I know his name. I believe he has a pair of binoculars that he's been looking through. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah, Brian, we met actually. We met some time back. Actually,
yes, sir.
I started this hobby by the Lonoscope, and then we met when I was returning the scope.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I remember you. Well, great. Excellent. I wished I could answer more of the technical side of this, but it sounds like that's something that would be much better if I put together a PowerPoint with slides that made more sense so we wouldn't have to stumble over putting them on. But I'm an equipment guy, and this is what really excites me. But I can say honestly, it's really cool to be in a garage surrounded by 3 excellent examples of the ability to look at the sun in hydrogen alpha. So that is my presentation for the night, unless you want me to do something about what's up in astronomy, and that can be short and sweet because I've got it in front of me on another screen right now.
Well, Brian, I think we're going ahead and let Tom get started here. I'm not sure how long his presentation is going to go, but
okay, go ahead and unshare my screen, and you've got it back.
Okay, Mike, do you want to introduce Tom to us real quickly? And
yes. I'll start.
Go ahead.
It's a distinct privilege to be able to introduce Tom Field of Field Tested Systems. This stuff is not easy. Astronomy is hard, astrophysics is harder. And just as most people do not understand what they are looking at, if they even bother to look up at the stars, those of us who are not entrepreneurs tend not to perceive the complexity of a successful business. We speak easily of the thermonuclear reactions that change hydrogen into helium, but we know also about carbon stars. And so too do we seldom take a second glance at the corner convenience store on our way to the multinational big box store. Tom Field majored in computer science at Tufts University in Boston and then at Washington University in Seattle. He was one of the 8 employees who founded QuickPen in Englewood, Colorado. Hot young stars have a lot of energy. He started in software development, but soon found that his skills with people put him in a sales booth at technology trade fairs and software conventions. QuickPen specialized in software for structural and mechanical engineering with products supporting computer-aided design for heating, ventilating, and air conditioning. We compress 13.8 billion years into a colorful diagram and think we understand the universe. So I'm going to say that 30 years later, when QuickPen had 80 employees and Tom Field was vice president of product development, the company was sold to a multinational. Trimble of Sunnyvale was founded by former Hewlett-Packard employee Charlie Trimble. They now have offices in 40 countries. They market to agriculture, construction, transportation, and forestry. Tom Field planned his next phase, turning to his own hobbyist passions in astronomy. He founded Field Tested Systems in 1995. In 2011, he started writing for Sky and Telescope and became one of their freelance editors. 5 years later, he left Trimble and devoted himself to us. As I said, this stuff is not easy. Hanging out with astronomers, you meet a lot of bright stars. But every now and then, you come across a blue supergiant. Allow me to turn the meeting over to our guest, Tom Field of Field Tested Systems.
Thanks, Mike. Wow. I mean, I don't know where you found all that information online. I guess there's no way.
I've been stalking you.
I was going to actually, that's why I paused, because the word stalking came to mind. I went, no, I'm not going to go there. Good evening, everybody. By the way, before I share my screen, I wanted to show you something that can make Zoom meetings a little easier. Some of you may be familiar with this already, and that is you may just be seeing a big image in the middle of your screen of me with just a little strip across the top. There's a different way to view the screen. If you look in your upper right-hand corner, you'll see this view button that I'm showing here. If you click on that button and select Gallery View, then you'll get to see like 25 little video feeds at the same time. So if you don't have the gallery view up, I think you'll find that that makes it more fun to socialize, because that way you can watch people as they fall asleep or, you know, whatever they're doing.
We call it the Hollywood Square, the Hollywood Square view.
Yeah. So
that's why I don't have a camera.
Thank you for inviting me tonight. And Mike, thanks. You know, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, as those of you who are part of the board in these clubs know. to make these kinds of talks happen. And I appreciate the coordination and the work that goes. So we're going to make it easy tonight. What I'm going to talk about is really pretty straightforward. And during the Q&A afterwards, and I'll talk for like 45, 50 minutes. During the Q&A, I got an example, a little video I can show you of a spectrometer on the sun, where you can see the features on the sun. Those solar telescopes are pretty amazing, and this is just another step. I sort of feel, because we've been at it for an hour, that we ought to take a break. So I'm just going to rattle on here. Don't hesitate to get up. And in fact, I ought to get everybody up to do some jumping jacks or something just to get your blood flowing. You've all had dinner, and I know it's, what, about 8:30 there. Thank you, Terry, on a Yang and Yin t-shirt. That's just what we need. Either that or those are some really huge sunspots and a weird form on that.
Yeah, I got this in Casper for the solar eclipse about 3 years ago.
Perfect. It's nice. Okay, so let's share my screen. And if we could, maybe I'm going to mute everybody. And let's see, you can unmute yourself, but I'd prefer, if you would, to hold off until after my talk to ask questions. So let me share my screen and we'll get things started. So there's that. And what I really wanted to share was that. Terry, you can see that prism there. Shake your head yes if you can. Great. Thanks so much. Wave your hands if anything goes awry. And I hope, in terms of what's being broadcast on YouTube, that they can see me, because I do have some show and tell. I love keeping astronomy weird. So whoever came up with that, my hat's off to you. That's great. So how have we managed to discover so much about the universe when, we've really just barely stepped outside our own front door? And we can see images of the universe in 2 dimensions. We can get a fleeting glimpse of a 3rd dimension of, distance when we have an eclipse. And if we wait a while, the time dimension, we can see things changing. And you can see there some stars going on and off, especially in the upper right-hand corner if you're having trouble finding them. If we spread the colors out, we get this as if 5th dimension. It's beautiful aesthetically. I love the colors. These aren't some designer's colors. These are, nature's colors. And those gaps reveal an enormous amount about the stars. We're going to move quickly. I'm going to spend a little bit of time just talking about the science behind what we do to get everybody to the same level. We're not going to have to understand a lot of the technical details of the equipment, or even, frankly, a lot about the astrophysics that goes on, because frankly, I'm being honest here, I don't understand a lot of it either. We can do a lot of cool stuff in astronomy. I've got to stop spitting, So we can do a lot of smart stuff in astronomy without understanding the details. And the beauty is that we can learn as much as we care to know. There's no quizzes or final exams. And observing it just for the beauty of it is the start. And then as we choose to, we can get into more of the science. So these gaps in the spectrum reveal things about what we're looking at, whether it's our star or other stars. And I'm not going to read the bullets because I know at least that much about giving PowerPoint shows. By the way, I'm going to show you examples of some of these as we're talking tonight. I'm really glad that I'm talking about science that's well settled, because this week or this last couple of months, if my PowerPoint show related to current events, I'd be up all night every night revising it. So this is a pretty stable show, and it's one of the reasons I think that we like astronomy, because things change very slowly. A little bit of the science, as I mentioned. Sir Isaac Newton was the first one to split light through a prism, white light, becoming a rainbow. And then you can also split light if you just bounce it off of a finely lined surface like a DVD, or through a finely lined surface. Real quick, a little bit of the science. Some of you may be familiar with the science here, and that is Bunsen invented his Bunsen burner to burn a sample like this one over here. And the light goes through a prism, and then I should have learned how to draw an eye. That's an eye, but it's backwards. So, but if you look here at that light that's split by the prism, you get to study the properties of the whatever you're burning in that Bunsen burner. By the way, one cool thing about Bunsen burners is Bunsen invented the burner and he deliberately didn't patent it. He said, this should be available for humanity to further science. Now, of course, today an inventor of something like the Bunsen burner would have 10 patents. So this guy over here, Kirchhoff, we won't talk much about him. He was a contemporary and a colleague. Just one quick thing on this next screen, if we can get there, and that is you're going to see examples tonight of spectra that have a rainbow, like in Roy G. Bivet order, right, from red to blue, with gaps. But you'll also see examples of emission spectra where it's more or less black in the background and you just have emission or bright lines. Now, which one you get, regardless of which one you get, notice the lines are in the same position. So, and which one you get, whether you get absorption or emission spectrum when you split light through a prism or through a diffraction grating, depends on things Kirchhoff talked about. We won't talk about much tonight. Basically, the temperature of any gases, the light's moving through. And again, this is one of those places that you can drill down and study more in detail if you care to. So these are like chemical fingerprints, forensic fingerprints. And you can see that each element has a different fingerprint. This hydrogen line, for example, here just doesn't appear under helium. In fact, the hydrogen lines are so common in the universe and so frequently used that we've given them this name here, the hydrogen bomber lines. When I say we, I mean the collective scientists of humanity. I don't really consider myself part of that group. Humanity, yes, but scientists, no. So notice that we've actually named some of the elements here, much like we name the constellations in the stars in the constellations in brightness order by the Greek letters. This isn't by brightness, but they do have names. And we're going to see a lot of these hydrogen alpha beta lines. This beta line is sort of in the robin egg blue region of the colors. And again, we're going to see those as we go forward. Here, a little tiny bit of science. I'm going to go off camera to wipe my nose. Jeez, TMI, I think. So what I wanted to show you here, notice that hydrogen has a very different fingerprint than helium. I love this. This is actually a poster that I created some years ago. We sell them mostly to teachers, observatories, and some amateurs who are really hard on fanatics for the field. This is a view of my software. Well, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail. We don't have to burn things anymore in the lab, thank goodness. We use these tubes you can see here on my video feed. It's like a fluorescent gas tube. It's got a gas in it. This one you can see there, maybe the lettering, helium. And can I get my camera to point to that? There we go. So if I turn that lamp on, you can see there's a helium spectrum. And in the lab, in physics classes, in fact, after I started creating products for amateurs, more for myself early on, and I'll talk about that in a minute, I realized that educators really could use a tool like this in the classroom. And I created this little camera here that, you can see the size of it there. It's pretty small for use on gas tubes. And that's been really popular with the high schools. And I wanted, again, I'll talk a little bit more about the kinds of things you can do in classrooms in a few minutes. Well, in fact, let's hold off on that. So far, everybody that I've talked about, old white men. Let's talk about some of the other contributors to the field who have not gotten the opportunities or perhaps recognition. First of all, Annie Jump Cannon and her team of women called computers. They were prohibited from accessing the telescopes at Harvard. And so they ended up, to our great fortune, but, and maybe there's two in the long run, hard to know, they ended up analyzing, no, it is easy to know. It wasn't their fortune. It was not their good fortune. They analyzed the glass plates from the spectrometers, the spectra of stars that were being captured. They were really good at it. And They ended up, as a result of their exposure to literally hundreds of thousands of spectra, a little more than a century ago, of coming up with a star classification scheme that, first of all, worked, unlike all the ones that had been created previously, but that really helped us understand the life cycle of stars. Here we've got Priyamvada Nataraja. She's at Yale, and I'm going to refer to my notes here if they haven't fallen off the little monitor. You can see here's my notes. She has studied, and the reason I have notes here is this is a relatively new slide for me. It was really astonishing for me when I started researching some of these people and realizing just how many are out there. Priyamvada has basically been studying dark matter and dark energy and gravitational lensing around black holes. Nancy Grace Roman, she got her PhD in the late 1940s as a woman, quite an accomplishment given the climate. She was the first astronomer at NASA, a big fan and promoter of the HST, the Hubble telescope that you can see behind her there, thank goodness. Elisa Quintana studies exoplanets and has discovered some that are in the Goldilocks region where they might have liquid water around a star and thus perhaps more likely to have life. And finally, Jedediah Eisler, she's at Dartmouth and studies hyperactive supermassive black holes. So we've come a small ways. There's a lot more that we can accomplish in the coming years in enabling other people to get access to the kinds of opportunities that many of us have had. So I want to talk tonight about this little grating here. It's called a star analyzer grating. We sell it for about $195. It's got a whole bunch of, that's a technical term, a whole bunch of fine lines in it. It's called a diffraction grating, and it's in an 1.25 inch filter cell. So you can just screw it onto most equipment. For example, you could screw it onto a DSLR here. We actually also sell this inexpensive adapter to get the grating threads down to 1.25 inch here. But you can use a cooled FITS camera, uncooled. You can use, I've got one here to wave around in front of the camera. This is a ZWO. This is the 178 color camera. Doesn't have to be color. In fact, mono is, as you know, if you've done any visual imaging, is more sensitive and scientifically more accurate in some ways. But color also has the added benefit of showing a color spectrum that you'll see in just a minute that's more intuitive to newcomers. And down in the lower corner here, we can see even in a filter wheel, you can mount the grating. Lots of ways to mount these things. You can piggyback a DSLR. Tracking is always nice. There is a way to do it without tracking, but it's fairly challenging because with just a DSLR, still, if you don't have a go-to mount, you've got to find your target. You've got to get things oriented right and let things drift through your field of view, but it's doable. So, okay, all that's behind us now. History, theory, equipment, done with that. Let's get into the fun. What can we actually do? Well, we put the starlight through a grating and we get that spectrum that you can see down here on our sensor. There's the starlight. Some of it just goes right through the grating, doesn't get bent. But now the grating acts just like a prism. And it's above my pay grade to explain how that works. The Etalon that we saw in the Lunt and the other solar telescopes in the previous presentation, there's some really complex physics there and relatively new physics. This is pretty straightforward. It acts just like a prism. So here's our first wonderful example, done with an 8-inch Newtonian and an imaging source video camera by Torsten Hansen. Each of these is a spectrum captured of a different star. So they're not all captured at the same moment. The stars are in order of temperature here. So if I can find, there's my mouse pointer. These are the hot B stars, and then they get cooler stars as we go down this way, down to type M stars and K stars. So right out of the gate, you can see that star spectra differ by temperature. This is really the heart of enormous, like 50 to 80%, who knows how you'd measure it, I wouldn't, of measure what? Of the research that gets done in astrophysics. I mean, really, almost everything we know about the stars we've done using spectra. So even if you're not an imager, I should have said this in the beginning, because some of you are sitting there, you're armchair astronomers, maybe you're visual observers, no problem. still what I found is the more I understand about what I'm looking at, the more interesting and more rich my experience is visually, or even just capturing visual images. So even if you never plan to do any of what I'm talking about tonight, I think you'll find an understanding. I know you'll find that an understanding of what I'm talking about, not that you need to be active and be able to give a lecture on it tomorrow or pass a quiz, but being familiar with it so that you're comfortable with, oh yeah, they're splitting light, looking at gaps. And look, I just want to show two quick examples on this screen. It is hard to find my mouse. There it is. So the first is, look at those wide dark areas there. Those aren't lines. Those are like forests, right? And they're just on these cool type M stars. We don't see those up here on these hotter stars. What's going on? Well, again, these are bands that are caused by molecules, not like hydrogen and helium, but complex molecules that are on the surface, the atmosphere of that star. And as the light goes through that more complex gas, there's very complicated interactions at the quantum level, they say. I think Richard Feynman said that only 3 people really understood quantum mechanics. It's like, phew, that's a relief for me. So cool stars have bands because of some of the molecules on them. These happen to be, they say, titanium. Oh, you know what's going on here? Is I forgot to tell PowerPoint, don't turn off my freaking cursor. Now, why they don't let me set this sticky permanently is beyond me. So, but anyway, this is titanium oxide. That's what's causing this absorption feature. And frankly, that's all I know about it. You want to read more about it? Great, you can, just like I could. What about this feature here? What do you see? What difference is here? Notice this one is darker on this type A star. So what's going on is, again, just real quickly, the Bohr model of the atom has these concentric shells that electrons are going around in, and they jump on occasion between shells. And when they jump, they can give off light or absorb light at certain characteristic fingerprint wavelengths. So on a type A star, the jump from 2 to 4 is creating that, what's color? This is sort of in the robin egg blue area. This is the hydrogen beta line. When an electron is jumping between 2 and 4 or 4 and 2, you get a feature right at this wavelength, 4800, this robin egg blue. The hotter stars, these type B stars, the electrons, when they're jumping, they're so energized by that extra heat that they go right past level 4 up higher. So you don't get a transition between this level. That's why the feature is less broad and less dark on these hotter stars in this type A star. The cooler stars, just the opposite. A lot of the electrons don't get pumped up to level 4 so that they remain at 2 or 1 or a lower levels, no lower level than 1. Let's rewind the tape. We'll edit that part out. By the way, my wife always emphasizes that I should dress for success, and I think this is probably the opportunity, given the screen that we have here. I'm pretty sure, in fact, I'm certain this isn't what she meant. So, but you're talking hydrogen alpha right in through here. And, you know, the thing is, you know, this is one of those true confession moments. We're all about color here, right? In spectroscopy, if you look down at the bottom here, the root, it's not quite red anymore. There's a little bit of gray creeping in. Now, I know some of you have had this experience at home over the last 10 months. And that is, I can't get my salon to answer calls. You know, they're not open. They can't make appointments. And so we're all facing that problem, whether you or perhaps a spouse. But anyway, my wife has told me this isn't what she meant, but dress for success is what the name of the game is. So suppose I said, do you see a little dimming right there? I mean, maybe you can. I don't know whether it's my imagination in that robin egg blue, but suppose I captured this spectrum. This is the first spectrum I captured, by the way, ever. And I tried to publish a paper and I said, yeah, right in the robin egg bluish area, there's a little dimming. That's not science. To do science, we need to be quantitative. So here's what we do. We graph it. How do we do that? Well, the star is very bright. This is an intensity axis here. So this peak is very high. And they're very narrow because the star is not very wide. But this over here, that thing's really wide. So this is really wide. And it's pretty dim here, and then it gets brighter, 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 and then dimmer, dimmer, dimmer. So this is dim, brighter, 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 dimmer, dimmer, dimmer. But look at this. See that dip? That's the heart of everything we're going to be talking about tonight. When we graph the intensity of this area, it becomes very clear. Now we're doing science. Now we have an instrument, we can measure how wide that feature is, where is it located, how's it compared to other stars, or this star tomorrow night or next year, other instruments, other telescopes, or your friend down the street. So how do we get that graph? So my story is I wanted to do spectroscopy. I don't exactly remember why, but I wanted to do some science. I got a grating, I put it on my C8 right outside the window here in my backyard, 3 miles from Pike Place Market. Set my C8 up one Saturday night, aimed it at Vega, and captured this spectrum. Came in at midnight. My blue jeans, my knees were grass stained because, it's Vega in August. What do you expect, right? So the next morning I figured, okay, I just want to create this graph. And I tried some of the free software that was out there. And I gave up. I was so angry. I mean, learning new software is always a challenge. I'm not a patient guy. You, like me, you've learned software in the past. This software was crashing. One of them wouldn't install. It was like DLL Hell, if you're familiar with that. They were both in French. There's nothing more. There are lots of more frustrating things than this. But one frustrating thing was an error message would pop up in French, and then when I'd click oui, the whole program would crash. So I told my wife I'd give up. I took the grating and I put it in a drawer. I said, life is too short. This is a hobby. And I'm supposed to be having fun. Well, yeah, sure, a little frustration here and there. I gave up. But over the coming weeks, like I'd be sitting in the kitchen eating lunch or whatever. I really wanted to do this. I kept thinking about it. So I figured, okay, I'll just write a piece of software, next weekend, I'll write a piece of software. Saturday, I wrote something to create this very graph. And one of the obstacles, oh yeah, I forgot. One of the things that I wanted to do, I don't know if I've got it here. It's sort of a cheap trick, but I used to have a slide with a lot of bullets in it about the key points I wanted to make. And then I realized nobody wants bullets. And so I gave that up. But I still want to announce key points with something. Key point is, one of the obstacles to getting involved with this is, oh no, I've got to learn a new piece of software. And what I want to do is, I'm not going to do a software demo. I'm not as dumb as I look. I know software demos don't work. It's almost 9 o'clock there. And, I can see the video feeds for some of you. And what I don't want to see at the tops of your heads is you fall asleep. So fortunately, you're muted. I wouldn't hear the snoring, nor would anybody else. This is my software. This is the very first spectrum I captured with my C8. Listen, I was not an imager. I mean, I'd taken a couple of videos of the moon, but so the reason I tell you that is this is one of those ding moments, is you don't have to be an imager to do this. Yeah, it helps. Yeah, you need to learn a little bit about exposure and focus and stuff. The cool thing is with the cameras today, these video cameras, you can do this real time with a laptop by your telescope. And then all the challenges that everybody who's been imaging for years and had to suffer through, you get to avoid, because now you've got real time. You can tweak your focus. You can change your exposure times in real time. And that's the R, by the way, in my software. RSpec stands for real-time spectroscopy. So let's spend just a minute looking at what happens. There's our spectrum. All you need to do is bracket in the star that you want to study. Can you see there's a gap there and maybe some gaps there, some dimming? And when you do that, here's the intensity graph. Look at all those dips. That peak there, of course, is because of this the starlight. But then this is that. So big deal, right? There's a bunch of dips. So what? Now what? How do we identify what's what? That dip there, for example, is that gap right there. Well, the cool thing is, I didn't mention this, but when Bunsen was burning all those elements with his Bunsen burner, he kept a great catalog. And that catalog has now served us for, 150, 170 years. So the great grand catalog, meaning minor revisions, but not many, is now embedded into my software and is frequently available. I asked the software, show us where the Balmer lines, where those hydrogen absorption lines would be on this graph if the star has, any hydrogen in it. Who knows? Let's check. Wow. Look at that match. All those dips are going through lines that our reference says would be created if the star had some cool hydrogen gas in its shell. This is now, with a backyard telescope in an urban setting, how we can do science. We've more or less conclusively shown that we can detect the hydrogen of a star with a small telescope. It's a really remarkable achievement. The other thing I want to mention is, this is not, it is a ding moment. Oh, knocking things on the floor here. And that is, I did this in the city. One of the cool things, let me grab that. It was pretty indestructible. That was my grading I knocked off. One of the things that is frustrating us all these days is, it's even more so now, maybe, to get out to our dark sky sites. I know the club has a couple of dark sky sites. I printed them out here, and then I realized I'm not going to be able to pronounce Pedernales. Is that how you say it? And Inks I can handle, Inks Lake. You don't have to go out to those places to do spectroscopy. It's not like visual imaging where there's all this fancy tweaking and you need color balance, and the more sensitivity you have, all that. Yeah, dark skies are better. But we're not interested in all those aesthetic adjustments. What we're looking for is these dips. Doesn't matter if they're deep or not deep. If we can see some dips, we're actually able to do science. So what I want to show you, just two more quick things, and we'll leave the software. This is actually a freeze frame from a video I made with a webcam, actually, back then, with the grading. I took the barrel of an eyepiece, and I literally duct taped the eyepiece barrel to my webcam. It was a Logitech webcam, and then put the grading right on it. So, but I want to show you that video because it's pretty cool. So now I'm playing that video. Our image is jumping around, right? Because of the seeing, the scintillation from the air currents. And so our data is jumping around. Now, this is really cool. I love showing you this. This will be the last thing I show you here. I'm going to zoom in on this feature. Let me turn off those lines. So we can see there's a dip there. Things are jumping around a fair amount. I'm going to turn on stacking. Stacking is when we add all the images together. Watch how quickly that dip and the spectrum stabilizes. All the noise, much of the noise has been eliminated by combining images. So you can do this real time under the stars. So final thing I want to mention is this is a great screen for outreach that I know I heard before the meeting started that you do an enormous amount of outreach. And by the way, your attendance numbers here are really great at this meeting. I appreciate people turning out and the club, having the draw to do that kind of thing. It's always fun to talk to a bigger group than 6 or 7 people. So when you show a screen like this, first of all, let's turn off that stacking or averaging. This is like a light to moths, people want to know, hey, what's that colorful thing over there? And this gives you a platform, a springboard to talk a little science. Now, there's not a lot of science that you need to get into. Again, you don't need to be teaching calculus or quantum mechanics. You'll learn what you need to talk about. Most people, it's surprising, and especially in areas that have more educational opportunities, economically advantaged areas, a lot of people are familiar with Neil deGrasse Tyson's Cosmos remake, and they'll go, oh yeah, that was in episode 3 or 4 that they talked about spectra. It always surprises me how much people know. Okay, I'm going to stop the playback here. The one thing I'd like you to do is, in your mind's eye, if you could just remember, if I get the right hotkey, this screen here. Again, it's got this spectrum, right, with these dips, and I've got these little lines that tell us where to expect the hydrogen lines to be. It's like an overlay template, because we're going to see some cool science from that as we go forward. Okay, so let's pop up that. There's an outreach event, for example. They're starting with a gas tube. This is in France, but you can see how effective this kind of thing can be in entertaining a large crowd. Here's a wide field view with a DSLR. We're going to move pretty quickly here. We got a lot of ground to cover. Let me just tell PowerPoint yet again, leave my cursor visible. You can see these stars here. We've got stars with their spectra here. This star here has some blobs, technical term, right? Blobs. So these are emission lines, and they've saturated the sensor, so they're a little wider than the spectrum. In fact, let's look at a Wolf-Rayet star. Here's a confession. When Janet Simpson sent me this some years ago, I couldn't remember what a Wolf-Rayet star was. She told me that's what this was. You know, things do go in one ear and out the other. And what I found is when you get your hands on data, especially if it's yours, stuff begins to stick. You begin to go out to your friend Wikipedia, you read about it, and because you have a conceptual framework already started, things hang around. So Wolf-Rayet stars, as it turns out, are late stage stars. They've shed some of their outer shell. They have very intense stellar winds. They're probably on their way to being a supernova. Want to know more? Have at it. But that's what I know, frankly, about Wolf-Rayet stars. Let's look at the spectrum. I know a little more, and I'll tell you the rest of it right now. Look at these peaks around carbon. Why would we be seeing carbon on a star? Remember, a star fuses its way through different elements, and one of them along the way is carbon, and that's what we're actually seeing with this spectrum. And again, notice the really simple gear and short exposure time. So let's look at another emission object. There's our beloved ring nebula. You can see hydrogen alpha and some, that Roman numeral 3 on oxygen just means it's ionized. Some of the electrons have been pulled out. So, but most extended objects aren't all that, aren't all that interesting with a star analyzer grading. We'll look at higher resolution device examples real briefly in a few minutes. But again, you can see here, these have slits. They're considerably like a factor of 10, an order of 10 more expensive and a lot harder to use because now we're on a 20 micron slit. I can't point my microscope or my telescope with that kind of precision or track. So these are cool devices, but nobody really starts with these high-end devices. I mean, by nobody, I mean almost literally nobody. So here's our beloved M42. Notice there's our hydrogen alpha emission line. And our ionized oxygen, there's that Roman numeral 2. Notice how, or 3, notice how narrow these features are. I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen for a second and ask somebody in a moment to unmute their mic if they care to. No requirement. I certainly won't call on anybody. And share with us the first time that you saw M42, the Orion Nebula. What was your experience? What was the telescope? Real briefly. Any takers? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone? Okay. Brian, you're muted. All right. So I think because nobody volunteered, Brian, it looks like you were still muted. What I'm going to do is I'll share my screen again, and you'll hear my brief experience. And that is in early 1990s, Shoemaker-Levy was coming, Shoemaker-Levy 9. I wanted to do astronomy. I'd seen great pictures over the years. I went to the Denver Astronomical Society. It's fun to remember when you didn't know something. I got out of the car and I looked out on the observing field, and what I saw, honest truth here, what I saw, those cannons that they shoot people out of at the circus? That's what I saw. I'm thinking, what are these circus cannons doing here? Of course, they were Dobbs, but I didn't know any better. I queued up. Somebody was running the Dobb, much like many of you or me. They were showing the Orion Nebula. I was all excited. They were talking about how cool looking it was. And I got up to the eyepiece, and my experience, and I bet many of you had this experience too. I went, so? It's a mono smudge. Who cares? It was only as years went by and I got the darker sights and I got a better telescope and actually learned how to use averted vision, and averted vision works really well at seeing extended objects like this. So I bet some of you still come back like me and look at M42. Why would we do that if it's just a smudge from the city, for example? Here's the deal. I mentioned earlier, real briefly, when you understand more about what you're observing, the visual experience gets that much richer. And that's what I found spectroscopy has done for me, is you start reading, you go, oh, well, maybe I'll read about why there's hydrogen alpha there. This is a stellar birthplace, right? A stellar nursery. We're seeing hydrogen alpha here, and I've never gone this direction in the show, but we're also seeing hydrogen alpha here on a late stage star like M57. Why, both ends of the life cycle, we're seeing hydrogen alpha. Why? So here's another example. These spectra here of Uranus and Neptune, notice these deep dips down here that are these wide bands. What did we hear about bands earlier? It means a complex molecule is absorbing some of the light. What might that be on Uranus and Neptune? And by the way, this is also done by Torsten Hansen with the video camera. Well, how about the methane atmosphere on these planets? That's what we're seeing here with a backyard spectrometer like the Star Analyzer. It's pretty amazing we can do that. In 1881, Henry Draper observed the spectrum of a comet. The New York Times thought that was significant. Heck, if Hank can do it, so can we. Here's a spectrum in the lower left. You can see this beautiful string of gems. There's the spectra peaks called the swan bands, mostly carbon. This was captured by a guy named Vikrant Agnihotri. He's a nuclear power plant engineer in Rajasthan. He was a beginner in 2013 when he captured this spectrum. It's an extended object, so you might think, as I mentioned earlier, you'd need a slit. But as it turns out, it's a compact enough object that you can get interesting spectra just with the Star Analyzer. He was a beginner back then, and now today he's an expert, and I learned from him. And what teacher doesn't like learning from their student? I do a lot of teaching, a lot of support, helping people get started, looking at their images. It's what I love to do. I've got time to do it. So don't think you're going to be hung out to dry if this is something you try and do on your own. So here's a more contemporary example of the sodium lines in NEOWISE. So, anybody who uses a C-clamp as part of their setup, that's my kind of do-it-yourselfer. My problem is I break everything, and I would have tightened that C-clamp so tight I would have collapsed the housing. So fortunately, Robin Leadbeater didn't do that. He's the designer of the Star Analyzer, and he put it on the nose piece of a video camera, and he observed the Perseids, and he captured this spectrum. This is actually the meteor itself going through the field of view in one frame. It was moving pretty fast. And here's the spectra, and that gap right there is that dip, and you can see he was able to identify. Now, this is sort of a pretty esoteric. I mean, you got to wait for a meteor, for goodness sake. It's cold enough out there already. To wait all night, people do it. Why not? They have fun at it. So I'm not going to talk much about the flash spectrum. We saw a lot of it over the last couple of years, and will be a lot more talk about it coming up, except that yellow line, they observed on the sun before we knew what the heck it was. And so we said, well, we don't know what it is, but we know something about it. We know it's yellow, whatever's causing that fingerprint. In Greek, the name for the sun is Helios. We'll call this stuff helium. Now you fast forward 30, 40, 50 years, we discovered the same thing here on Earth. We were able to go Eureka. That stuff that we discovered 93 million miles away without even going there, we now discovered here on the Earth. Pretty cool science. If you're into novae, some novae have deep dips like in this iron. That doesn't occur in this one. Notice DSLRs are in action here. What's Doppler shift? Just a brief review. Most of you are familiar with it. If something's coming towards us, like a car or a train, its car horn is higher pitched than if it's moving away from us. So, the common example is a train going through a station, right, high, low. But even cars going past you with their horn, or even tomorrow when you're in the car on the freeway, I'm going to betray my ignorance and provincialism when I say I don't know. I'm sure Austin has freeways. Boy, open mouth, change feet on my part, huh? as cars go past you or trees go past you, you'll hear this, hello, right? You even hear Doppler shift on things going past you like that. Suppose we were expecting a spectrum to have this triplet, great word, almost self-defining. We expected these absorption lines, these 3 absorption lines right here, and instead we saw them down here over to the right. That would mean we'd call them red shifted because they were moved towards the red and the object was moving away from us. And the opposite, of course, with blue, the object moving towards us. Let's look at a really cool example really briefly. An exploding star. So when 2 stars are going around each other, this slide or these images I pulled off the internet, I love it. A binary pair, wouldn't that be 4 stars? So when a binary system, when 2 stars are going around each other, we won't get into the details except somehow some of the gas on this one goes onto this white dwarf. And when that happens, you pour gas on something hot, it explodes, right? And there's lots of different types of stars that explode. This is what I just showed you, type 1A. There's other types where they run out of fuel and collapse, right? But let's look at this. In M101, there's the star. There's a photograph of another type 1A supernova, not the one we're looking at here, but you can see it looks like some sort of explosion, right? Some sort of sphere expanding. There's a spectrum captured by David Strange with just what is less than 15 minutes of integration time in a 9-inch telescope. There's the spectrum. And look at that deep dip there. We can barely see it in the spectrum mono, but there it is there. So, we talk about standing on the backs of giants. The giants figured out that supernovae have their own fingerprints depending on what type they are. So one of a supernovae, that when these 2 stars share some gas, is a very different fingerprint when it explodes than one where it collapses because it ran out of fuel. Beautiful diagram here. When a type 1A supernova goes off, it's got a spectrum with a deep dip right in the blue here. And that blue, or purple in this case, where is this the first time I've used this slide? I was going, where's my blue? Where's my blue? This is off of with permission, a woman on the web who drew it herself, a postdoc. See that robin egg blue, as it turns out, that's ionized silicon. Not that it matters, except that it's nice to be able to talk about it. Look, these core collapse supernovae don't have a deep dip there. So this really is a fingerprint. And so David was able to say, this is a type 1A supernova. This is one of the things that professionals would like help on from us amateurs. And that is helping to identify supernovae. It's a little hard to do because almost all of them for the last 30 years or so are outside our galaxy, so they're pretty dim. But here's something really cool, and then we'll move on. If we measured what that exact color was, and it's at 6150 angstroms, that's the unit of measure we use for color. Now stick with me here, it's very simple. That's what David observed down here. Now let's go to Bunsen's records. Suppose he burnt silicon, beat sand. At rest, he would have seen the same dip at 6355. That difference is a Doppler shift, something's moving. Look, I didn't remember the Doppler shift formula. Wikipedia is my friend and yours. And when you plug the numbers in, you get to measure the speed with which that supernova shell is expanding towards us, the blue shift. There should be a couple wows there. First, wow, that's fast. Second is, wow, I can't believe I did that with just a small grating and a small telescope. So this guy, Adam Riess, you may remember, won the Nobel Prize in 2011 for observing the accelerating cosmological expansion. And what type of star do you think he might have used as a standard candle? A type 1A supernova. So now, once you've done this on your own or understood how it's done by other amateurs like yourself, now you have another way of understanding how that Nobel Prize was accomplished, what the data collection was about. Somehow I think his equipment was a little more sophisticated than our star analyzer. But in bang for buck, we do pretty well competing with him. So what about the spectrum of a black hole? Well, of course, a black hole doesn't emit light, but the accretion disk, as matter spirals in, that matter gets very hot and emits light. Let's look at 3C273. I've never looked at it myself. David Hayworth in Portland, Oregon did. There's the spectrum, 2 little dots of light. Let's zoom in. There they are. And there's the graph. Now this guy, now I'm looking here at all the pictures here in the meeting to see if we have anybody young here. I'm not going to call on anybody and put them on the spot. It looks like most everybody's pretty old. When I do in-person meetings, especially, and there's some teenager, I may, without putting them in the hot seat, point out that this guy was just 25 years old when he made this observation in the mid-1960s. He was studying this and he wanted to figure out, well, what are those peaks? And he did science. He said, let me compare those peaks to some other things that we know about. For example, let's compare it to the hydrogen lines that we know Bunsen discovered and you saw in my software. This is the mind's eye screen I want you to remember. And boy, they don't line up, do they? So we're pretty sure these aren't hydrogen emission lines because they don't line up with hydrogen here in our lab sample or on Vega, except they do. And Martin Schmidt figured that out. And there's a great interview with him. It's a transcript. He describes his experience. It was too simple a solution. He was afraid he'd made a big mistake. He called his colleagues in. They all agreed it seemed like the right explanation for this. He went home and he told his wife that night something terrible happened at work. Terrible. He's made this big discovery, this enormous red shift. What's terrible about that? He was worried about the publicity and that he wouldn't be able to do his work because he'd be so famous. So the significance of this discovery was that he was able to calculate the red shift, this distance, and we are too. You can see we got very close to it, and determined that this object was 2 billion light years away. Wow. The significance of the discovery was if this object is that enormous distance away, for us to see it has to be unbelievably bright inherently. And in fact, there's 2 great examples. I think one of the things we amateurs like is just how it's sort of the size stuff, you know. Man, it's big. The universe is huge. I think sometimes that it either makes us feel small and unimportant, or hopefully it just makes our woes feel unimportant. So, but 2 examples here. You've seen lots of examples of this kind of thing. For this to be as bright as it is so far away, it has to be 100 times brighter than all of the billions of stars in the Milky Way. And this example I like too. Now, Pollux, right? It's a star. We know stars are really a long way away. Not as far as other galaxies, but pretty freaking far, right? To use a technical term. And you can see there that if it was as far away as Pollux, it would still be as bright as our sun. That thing is bright. The thing that astonishes me is that this light has come from so far away and is so old, but it still has information in it that allows us to look at its fingerprint and tell something about that object. It's amazing. So not much in the universe ages that well. In fact, humans definitely don't. Here's Martin Schmidt a few years ago. And, you know, I've been justly accused of throwing him under the bus and, you know, basically throwing stones in a glass house. Look, he's got a full head of hair. I don't. I'm envious. Okay, get over it. Or maybe I should get over it. Okay, 2 more quick examples and we'll finish up. Thanks for your patience. So far, we've been looking at things that are, let's stick with this for a moment, hydrogen alpha, beta, gamma, like on Vega. And these are what? About 50 angstroms wide is about the smallest that we can see. Now, wouldn't it be great? Suppose we wanted to zoom in on that hydrogen alpha feature. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we could just use our mouse roller wheel and just zoom in? But we can't, right? A lot of us tried that on the moon, right? I should have one to wave in front of you here, and I don't. But, you know, we've tried. Well, put more magnification on that. Let me see that crater up close, right? After a while, it's empty magnification. There's nothing more to squeeze out of that particular telescope and equipment and seeing conditions. Same thing with spectra. So in order to get the details, to zoom in, we have to use one of those more expensive slit spectrometers I mentioned. So there's Vega. This is that feature. And you can see there's a lot of detail in there. Let's do some science. Let's compare two known objects. Let's compare the Vega spectrum to the moon spectrum for hydrogen alpha. Look at the differences there. What's that? Well, the moon isn't moving towards or away from us. It's relatively in the same position distance-wise. So the Vega spectrum is shifted because Vega's radial velocity. This distance difference is too small to do unless you're using a high resolution spectrometer, right? 0.3 angstroms resolution. Can you imagine getting down to 0.3 on this scale? You just can't do it with a star analyzer. Last example, I promise. And there we're measuring the radial velocity. So here is a star, believe it or not. It's rotating. And this edge is coming towards you. This edge is moving away from you. So we've got blue shift and red shift. I can never remember which off the top of my head when I'm in front of a group. So here's another way of looking at that schematically. Star's rotating. This edge is coming towards you, blue shifted. This edge moving away from you, red shifted. So what would happen to a spectrum of a star where it was really spinning fast? So we had a lot of Doppler shift from spin. God, that sounded wimpy. A lot of Doppler shift from spin. Notice that Altair is really, to use a technical term, smashed down, right? Some of the light that was here was spread over here. Some of the light that was here was spread over there. So we can, these giants upon whose shoulders we're standing were brilliant and are brilliant. Who would think that just by looking at the color of a star, you could tell how fast it was rotating? Or the color of a galaxy and determine how fast it was rotating? Or the differing colors of a galaxy determining how fast it's rotating and discover that it's rotating too fast to hold together by gravity. It should have torn itself apart. There must be dark matter. This is the kind of thing that when you understand spectroscopy, everything else opens up a little bit more. Okay, so real quickly, how do you get started? Star Analyzer, I've mentioned a couple times. Some sort of camera I've discussed, some sort of software. My software is $109. This is some of the freeware I mentioned earlier. It's good. They've improved and they're not bad, but it's a pretty steep learning curve. They're not designed by software developers. They're designed by really bright, capable people. They're friends of mine now. Also, you may need a little bit of a thread adapter, and that's because this distance here, while not critical, it's not like focus, it needs to be a certain distance, not too far away, not too close as a star analyzer. So, and there's a calculator on my site to help you figure that out. Put your telescope's focal ratio in and stuff. And a lot of people just send me their equipment specs. There's a form to do that on the site. And I tell them, oh yeah, you ought to buy for like $10 a little spacer, an empty filter cell to move it a little further away, that kind of thing. So there's the calculator, and there's where I forgot I had this in here. Hey, it's been a month since I gave this talk. It's already fading. So there's the input specs you put in. If you get 3 green flags over here, you're good to go. So there's tons of neat books out there. This one in particular is cool because, and it's linked to on my site under links. There it is. Because the cool thing about this book is he shows you these really cool diagrams of what you can expect. And you can see he calls out, but listen, I'm a knuckle dragging programmer. I don't know the significance of ionized nitrogen or helium, but he does. And I don't have a slide of it, but the cool thing that he does is he writes prose to explain to us what we're seeing spectral-wise. And this is written for us, not postdocs, not physics students as undergraduates. So this is a cool book to understand what we're seeing. So we have a great forum where there's lots of help available. You can see some people doing solar spectra here. The AVSO is jumping further and further into spectroscopy. Again, Stella Kafka, their current executive director, great director, as well as Arnie, her predecessor. They're professional astronomers. They know the importance of this. They now have a spectra database that you can contribute to. I've given talks, gave a big talk to them, I guess this fall in a workshop. But 4 years ago, I gave a hands-on workshop at the SAS conference in LA. And everybody had their laptops and sample data. And here's great news. You can download my software for free for 30 days. The same page will let you download the sample data I used in that workshop. And there's a link to the YouTube video of my workshop. So tomorrow morning, it's Saturday after all, once you've got your honeydew list done, you could sit down, hopefully with 2 monitors, and you could go through that workshop. It's an hour-long workshop. When you're done, even if you never do any of this again, you'd be deep in. You'd have it in your muscles, so your muscle memory. Maybe not memory, but you I don't even have it in my memory. So there are opportunities to do pro-am collaboration. Everybody in this list, except for Bob Stencil, who's at the University of Colorado, are amateurs. So we've come a long way in the last 200 or 300 years, as well as the last hour or so. I ran a little longer than I hoped to. I apologize. We do stand on the shoulders of giants, and we get to give back and pay it forward. I know that you do a lot of outreach. I appreciate all that. I hope you'll continue doing that when things open up again. It's nourishing, as you all know. It's a wonderful opportunity. I'd like to thank you all tonight for your patience, for at least some of you smiling at some of my jokes, not grimacing too badly. And I love answering questions. I will talk until we run out of time or interest. And you can see here contact information. There's a contact form on the site too. Easy to find on Google if you don't want to write this stuff down. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for the time being, and we can open it up to questions and have a go at it. Thanks again.
Tom, I'd like to start with a question. This is Tim Brown.
Hi, Tim.
And am I correct? You did this for us many years ago over a webinar.
I might have, yeah.
You did. I was the vice president then and got you. I'm moving out close to you, by the way, soon. So
I heard that mentioned. Well, make sure to look me up. I'm here in Seattle, and
we'll be in Bellingham.
That's great. I got a cousin there. I'll be coming up. So this summer, as things open up, let's make a point of it.
Sounds good. We got a big house coming up.
Oh, good. Great. But get all the observing you want to get in before you come to Washington.
I know. It's the hard part. Yeah. Grandchildren make up for it. Now I'll shut up and open it to the rest.
Don't forget to unmute yourself if you've got a question.
Got a question.
Well, Tom, hello.
Hey,
is this working?
Yeah, Brian. Sorry that it wasn't working earlier. I didn't give you enough time.
Tom, go ahead. I think I figured this. I got this headset today. Go ahead, Tom. I'm just checking to make sure it's working.
Great. Somebody else.
Which Tom are we talking to?
Hey, Tom. There's another.
Hello, Tom. I've got a. So I was noticing in your software, you actually had the classification system for stars. So can you actually overlay like type O star over your spectra and try to determine whether or not it is that type of star?
Yes, you can. Thank you for asking that, Tom. I like your name and the way you think. So let me just really briefly show you that to give you an idea. So here, am I sharing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, you can see the software there. Good. Let's turn that off and just turn off the eye candy there. So there's Vega that I observed. Now, built into the software is a reference library of different star types. Again, this is most of what I'm talking about here I learned after I got into spectroscopy. You know, I sort of knew it, but didn't really understand the big picture. And that is that hotter stars have different Planck curves, Planck-like curves in stars' cases. So for in this case, Vega, which is what we're looking at here for my first night out, is a type A star. So there in green, we can see Vega. So the first thing to notice is that there's a correspondence between this absorption feature, which is the hydrogen alpha, and that one, as well as these two, as well as these two. And there's really a correspondence between the professional data, although their dips are much deeper, much better full width half maximum. But notice that the professional data keeps going up as we get into the blue, and my data crashes down to 0. And that's because my camera and all of our cameras lose sensitivity as we get into the wings, into the red and the blue. So there's one step which I won't show right now that allows you to correct for your camera's lack of linearity in color. And so, yes, you can compare the shapes. And it's one of the things I didn't mention was on my site also are an enormous number of videos that you can watch where I walk through. There's no big complicated manual. You know, within 3 or 4 minutes of watching the first 2 tutorial videos, you're good to go to do the kinds of things I'm showing you tonight. But I wanted to show you a cool video that really was what I wanted to do when I first got involved in spectroscopy. So let me move this over here. So this is the spectra of Albireo A and B in mono, because it's more sensitive. And I'm now correcting for the fact that my camera is not sensitive in the same way to all colors. So there is my Planck-like temperature curve of the star. It's pretty noisy, and it's a hot star. So most of the heat is in the blue range, like in a candle, where the real heat in a candle is in the blue. Now let's play this video. This is actually live under the stars. It's jumping around because our seeing was changing. Now I'm going to move these orange lines and sample the other star. Watch how the shape of this curve changes. Albireo A is much, much cooler. So now we can see the shape change. Much like, now it's not quite a Planck curve because stars aren't black bodies, but this is cool and fun, but isn't the way professionals do it. Professionals actually look for features and know that different types of stars, and this is what Annie Jump Cannon and her women team of computers did, was begin to classify stars by, you know, do they have a lot of hydrogen lines? Do they have a lot of, you know, whatever, different lines, helium and so forth? It's a great question, Tom. I'm sorry to have taken the ball and really run further downfield than maybe anybody wanted to hear, but I appreciate your asking.
That was cool.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. I think it's cool too. And that's really, that very demo is what got me into all this. I wanted to know the difference in temperature between Albireo A and B. Other questions? Anybody else?
We have a couple of questions from on the chat, Tom.
Thank you, Dawn. Go ahead.
First is from Setwant. He says, if the spectrum is captured on the same sensor with the same imaging circle as the telescope, will it not be corrupted by the other stars, etc.?
That's a great question, Sawan. And it would be, except that we get to bracket in. You can see here on the screen. In this case, all I've got is Vega. But there could be stars all over the place, and none of them would affect this intensity graph. Let's close that green one. What an ugly color. That really is puke green. The only stars that would affect this intensity curve here would be stars in this region. And they can interfere a little bit unless you have a slit. Turns out it doesn't often happen, and there's ways around that also. You can just eliminate those points over here, or you can just rotate your grating a tiny bit so the spectrum is at an angle and isn't falling over top a star. So it's a good question, Salwan. Thanks for asking it. Clearly you're thinking about this. Other questions?
We have another one from Neil, who's asking, instead of focusing on a specific star, how would you analyze a large nebula region?
Great question. It's tough to do without a slit because what we're seeing over here, just to get technical for a second, or what we're seeing here is the star just repeated all the way, an infinite number of times all the way across. So if this is a blob, you're going to see blobs here and it'll be really muddled. You can, though, have some fun with that. I don't think I have an example here to show you, where suppose we had a big nebula here, we could sample different regions of that nebula, and we would be able to see differences. In fact, on my PowerPoint show, let's see if I can find it real quickly here while we're looking at it, is you'll need some Dramamine if you're trying to follow along. Where is, oh, there it is. Look at, so look at the difference here. I was all excited when I first saw this. So here's an extended object that you were asking about, Neil. And it's not a point source, right? It's extended. It could be a galaxy. And you can, some galaxies, in fact, we'll come back to that in a second. Notice that the red from the hydrogen alpha has a bigger hole in the middle or than the oxygen, or stated another way, this lifesaver-like shape is thicker here in oxygen than red in the hydrogen. I thought, oh, right, that's really science, you know? There's more red on the peripheral than there is closer to the center. Well, this is just because my camera's response isn't that great. So this is not scientifically different data because the source object is different. But what I wanted to show you was, oh, yeah. was something called an AGN. In fact, I don't think I'm going to show you that right now, just because I don't want to drag us all over the place. If we have more time in a few minutes, I'll show you. You can look at galaxies if they're really compact and see their hydrogen emission. AGN are active galactic nucleuses, and you can actually measure the Doppler shift that's occurring. By the way, quick story, and that is when I published my first article in 2011 in Sky and Telescope, Bob Noye was the editor-in-chief, great guy. And I talked about 3C273 and that red Doppler shift. And Bob was a smart guy, great guy. And he's thinking to himself, Tom's wrong here. He's using the wrong terminology. And he sent an email to Adam Rees, who later that year won the Nobel Prize. And he said, Adam, Tom here in this article is talking about Doppler shift of this quasar because of cosmological expansion. Is that the right terminology? And he knew the answer. And Adam responded, no. And this is sort of cool just because it reveals the precision of language and the subtlety that professionals use. With 3C273, this is the first time I've actually gestured this way, way far away. First time in this talk. I've never done it in any talks before. And you think about it, it's moving away, I thought, so it's Doppler shift, right, from cosmological expansion. Adam Rees said, no, it's not called Doppler shift because nothing's moving. What? Nothing's moving? What do you mean it's moving away? It's redshifted. Yeah, it's redshifted from cosmological expansion. Space is expanding, but nothing is moving. Anyway, that's the closest I ever got to a conversation with a Nobel Prize winner. Other questions? Any other questions?
I have one. It might be a little bit too technical, but I'm just still trying to understand why an element like helium that gives off that alpha line, because an electron is falling back into its original lowest energy state shell. So it gives off that particular color photon.
Well said.
And then helium has the same thing. There's the electron falling back to its lowest energy state, and it's still the closest. Why would those two be different colors?
That's a wonderful question, Jamie. And there's a Zoom room full of people here. Some of whom are going, I know the answer to that, and others who don't. And it's a great question. So the issue here is, and here's the cop-out, quantum mechanics. It's above our pay grade. But the real answer, or a simpler answer, and this is all I know about it, is a helium atom, those shells, those orbitals are in different distances because, again, the nucleus has a different composition, right? There's 2 protons and potentially neutrons. And so because the shells are different distances, the transition energies, which you so well described, are different. It's a perfect question. And it gets really complex really fast when you have something that has lots of electrons, meaning something further down the periodic table, like carbon or whatever. The transitions get so complex that it's again, hard for us mere mortals to identify what's what. But that's why they differ. Does that make sense the way I explained it?
Yeah, so basically the photon has, for like a bigger atom, the photon has to be higher energy, so it's a different color. It's more blue and okay.
Great, and thanks, Tom. See, I saw your acknowledgement that I was going down the right path. I appreciate it. I'm really faking it here, folks. I'm not an astrophysicist. I'm like I said earlier, a knuckle dragging tool guy. So just a programmer. So, and again, I tried to emphasize, I gave up on the ding. It's too tacky. But the thing is, and I said it a couple times, you don't have to know a lot in order to have a lot of fun. And you can ask questions of the sort you just asked, Jamie, or that Tom asked about, how do we tell star temperatures? Those kinds of questions are questions that you can get answered by other people on our forum or other places. I wanted to show, since we were talking star temperature, I don't know if this is going to show up. No, it doesn't really. These are different stars of different temperatures, and there's different features. For example, here, you can see in this column, you can't really see it, can you? Some of these features are deeper as you get into different stars. This is a hydrogen beta line. This is how professional tells star temperatures. Is how deep is that hydrogen beta feature? If it's really deep, it's probably a type A star. If it's really shallow, then it's either a really hot star or a really cool star. And those are fingerprints that are determined by the chemical composition. Other question? Oh, before I do another question, I wanted to show you another video. Am I sharing my screen right now? No, I'm going to share it. Okay, so this is going to be the hydrogen alpha sun. So this isn't something that I sell. You know, it's always awkward for me in these talks because I think people think, oh, he's trying to sell us something. Yeah, I'm trying to sell you spectroscopy. I wouldn't mind making a few bucks, but I'm really just trying to sell you on the excitement of things. So this is a spectrometer. It's a solar spectrometer from Shellyak. Am I sharing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And there's an eyepiece here, and you don't even need tracking. Unlike what you saw from Mike earlier, you don't need the tracking like on a hydrogen alpha. And this has a prism in it. It's, you know, or it has a grating of some sort. It's got a slit. But because it's such high resolution, the rainbow is so stretched out. For those of you who are grandparents, I don't know when you do this, where you say to your grandkid, how much do I love you? This much. Well, that's what the spectrum is spread out. So with a slit device like this, you see just a tiny little piece of the spectrum, some red here or some yellow here or green or whatever. So it has this little tuning arm here that lets you change where you're looking at. So let's play this video just for a moment. This is great for outreach, by the way. There's the tuner, where you get to specify where in the color spectrum you want to be looking with your little magnifying glass. And you can see we're pointed here in what's called the magnesium triplet. Turns out magnesium, again, for quantum mechanics stuff that's way, way over our heads, there are 3 lines where normally there'll only be 1. And there's a sodium doublet, same issue. But let's take a look at what through the eyepiece it looks like. Now, this is an example of how to make a really crummy video for the eyepiece. This I made for a friend years ago on our front lawn. So the real device is a lot more fun to look at, but you can see that triplet there in the green. That's the absorption features from magnesium on the sun. Now, what I'm going to do in this next really brief part of the video is I'm going to move that lever to a different part of the spectrum. Look how the colors change as we're looking at different regions. And there's the hydrogen alpha of the spectrum. So this is a cool device. There it is again, a little gnomon to help you point it at the sun. There's my my Crocs on our front lawn. There was one of the, I'm just final step here showing you the sodium doublet, it's called right there. It's really, the cool thing is just aesthetically, it's gorgeous. It's easier to see any of this than it is with to see, you know, something through a telescope, because your eye doesn't have to be in the exact right position because it's this huge object you're looking at. Colors are gorgeous. This is a great tool to augment the solar outreach that you'll be doing. I love solar astronomy for outreach because I get a good night's sleep and because I get to see the faces I'm talking to, and you know, there's young kids and it's the sun after all. And so in addition to the hydrogen alpha telescopes that you saw earlier, the Meads and the Luntz, this would make a nice tool for you for outreach. The only gotcha is it's not cheap. It's about $1,300.
Wow.
Is that why I don't have one of these yet?
Yeah, exactly. I saved that for the end because if I'd said that at the beginning, you all would have tuned me out. Anyway, cool device I thought you might be interested in knowing about for the future.
So you could stick a one-shot color camera, I mean an astro camera, in place of the eyepiece there, and it would give you high fidelity on the color.
Yeah, Terry, yeah, you could use a phone if you wanted. You could also, if you cared to, you could just put an astronomical video camera on it, and then you've got the challenge of, you know, how to avoid the bright sun on your computer screen. But yeah, it's just a standard eyepiece, easy to focus, so easy to set up. It's a cool device.
These aren't common here, are they? We don't see a lot of these here.
Pardon me?
We don't see a lot of these Shellyacs here. I think I ran into one about 3 years ago at a daytime night sky festival that we did over in Dripping Springs, and a fella had one of those the first time I saw one, but I haven't seen one in person since.
You know, I was going to try and find mine, but it's in the closet somewhere. I think the reason you don't see them, Brian, is they're expensive. You know. So
have you priced a lunt recently?
No, are they more than that now? I don't.
I have more in that lunt than that Shellyak you just quoted. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, eventually, somebody, one of the reasons I keep beating the drum on spectroscopy is the more of us there are, the more likely manufacturers are going to start jumping in and competing with simpler and less expensive devices. So that's another reason to get in. L high res light. I'm just curious what the cost is right now. Yeah, $1,400 from OPT. So,
quite reasonable, and you're probably not going to find a used one anywhere. That's probably a new quote price, whereas some of what we've put together that I showed earlier tonight and some of what I've seen other people put together traded on cloudy nights and what have you, and you can get into a single stack way under that. It's the double stack that pretty much doubles the price of the entire thing.
Yeah, but I meant to mention, I wrote down a note when you were talking about that. I was multitasking while you were talking at certain points, but I wanted to mention, if you didn't bring it up, that the difference between the single and the double stack, in my experience, is that the double stack, the image, and you've probably seen this, Brian, is dimmer. So I find that it can be a little harder for people to see what I'm pointing out. But also the single stack is going to show prominences more clearly. The double stack is more going to show the surface granulation and the sunspots. The great thing is everybody has their own activity that they prefer. For me, I like showing the prominences because I think they're more dramatic. And I like to say, see that arch? That's like a McDonald's arch, except you could drive the earth right through that arch. And that sort of blows people away. Everybody has their own sort of dance, though. For that
well, the other side of that, Tom, is all you got to do is reach up there and spend 15 seconds screwing that double stack off and set it on the table, and you go right back to single stack.
I didn't know it was
because it stacks. In most cases, it's just sitting in there like an eyepiece.
Oh, cool! So you get the best of both worlds. Yeah.
If you're willing to invest in the double stack, it was very eye-opening for me for surface details. You're right. That's what it is really good for, is contrast to surface details. Spectroscopy, of course, you're getting into the full range, and that's what I want to understand better as well.
Say, Steve,
go ahead.
Tom, do you know Stephen Ramsden?
Oh, yeah. Wonderful, great guy, a real friend.
Yeah, Mike, that's somebody we need to snag sometime, is to get a presentation from Steve Ramsden. But I would expect he's a consumer of some of your products.
He is. I think I gave him the products only. Consumer user, yes. Just because he's this guy who just gives. And ran into a problem right before the solar eclipse because the state of Alabama was worried about eye damage with the filters that he was giving out, and he pretty much had to back way off on the outreach he was doing. He has a van, he's got solar scopes in it, he was going to schools, and he's an interesting guy because he's and I don't think he'd object to my description. He's pretty rough in that he comes from a pretty tough background. He's a smoker, he's a big guy, but students really love him because he's authentic. He's different than the kind of polish that normally come before them. So yeah, he's a cool guy, and he has every solar scope that Lunt has ever made. He was helping promote their products. But I'll tell you an interesting story. When I went to Meade in like 2001, they had this thing called HOTS. It was a solar observing. It was a conference for a day or two. They're promoting their products, but we had a lot of interesting talks. At that point, Scott Roberts was VP of engineering. He's since moved from there to Explore Scientific, his own company now. And even there, it was clear he was on fire. A wonderful guy. He took us into the room where they make that Eidolon that you were talking about, this device that bounces the light inside. It's got some quartz in it. And he said, to be honest, this is like a black art. Some people have the touch, to put these things together. And like even computer chips, some of them just never work. But some people have a much higher productivity and success there. Oh, there it is. Thanks for showing us that, Brian. You're muted again, Brian. Sorry.
Okay, am I on now?
Yes.
Hang on, there we go. Okay, this is the double stack on the front. You saw it took me 10 seconds to unscrew this off the front.
Yeah.
So I ran this single stack for 2 years before I found a deal of one of these used. But as you can see, this is this highly reflective glass, and this is what's called a tilt tune. It just does a very slight tilting between this little divider you see between here. And you can see this in a shadow that moves when you're looking through this. It'll just take a little ghost image while you're looking at it there in the center. It'll kind of move off to one side or the other, and you can fine tune it. So it's really just two pieces of glass with a very slight tilt angle to them.
Right.
And the entrance on the front is very much the same thing. This one's 50 millimeter. That's what it looks like on the front. And that's the back. So this is just another etalon. And like you said, it dims it down. So it gives contrast to a different portion of the sun.
Sure.
And that's really the whole thing. As far as how they're made, I know they're ultra flat and ultra precise. I've been reading about it on the Lunch site.
Yeah, they really are. Well, what other questions? Anybody have any other questions?
I have a question, Tom.
Great, Dawn, go for it.
So for those of us, much like Brian, that are spending their well-earned money on double stacks, what are some other tools or some other activities that you find are really great for drawing in, younger solar spectra astronomers, especially from an outreach standpoint, because we do cater to a lot of young astronomers. And spectral astronomy can seem probably a little beyond their reach at times.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously being able to show them something visual is always key.
Yeah. What I'm doing, everybody does outreach, has their own little spiel. The pause there was I was debating whether to use the expression attention whore because I love attention. Basically, everybody has their own song and dance. One thing I like to do is, and I don't know how you do this with the group, with my Lunt, is I really, if somebody's interested, first of all, I have them sit on an adjustable chair. And secondly, I hand them a little clipboard and say, can you draw those after they've seen the sunspots, have them draw the sunspots. And I have them draw the sunspots. I have a clipboard with some small pieces of paper. I learned the hard way. You don't just say to an elementary school kid, draw the sun, because then they spend the next 60 seconds trying to draw a perfect circle. So now I just take a pen and go, see, oh, there's the sun. I just draw the sloppy thing so they get the idea. And then I coach them, can you see some dots, and have them put it, and that really, as you know, when you draw, you begin to see a little more. Now, the cool thing about doing that is the flip side has a handout on it. And this is a NASA image. And so I get to talk about the size of the sun compared to the planets. And this is something they can take home. And I'd like to think some of these end up on refrigerators under magnets at people's homes. The other kinds of things that I do when I'm talking sun, just standard stuff, and this you can't do at night, but I love doing it during the day, is I take a little, it's actually a little jewelry bead, like a BB, on a piece of fishing string so I can hold on to it. But I don't show them that. I literally have a basketball there. And I say, so if this is the size of the sun, how big do you think the Earth is? Then I show them the BB and I watch the parents' eyes behind them going, because people don't understand. And then I talk about the Earth going, what does the Earth do with respect to the sun? And most don't have an idea. So then, while I've asked that question, what I like to do is run in circles around the student, in a big circle, and pantomiming exhaustion. I need an answer. I'm getting tired. But what I do is after that, I talk about how here's the Earth. This is when you were born. And then I go around and I show them when the Earth gets back to the same place. Happy birthday. You've gone around the sun once. They love that because it's now their birthday. And then to talk about distance, I just take that BB and I start running. and I just disappear on them. I go 25, 50 yards away. You can do all of that stuff with them. I don't know if that's the kind of thing you were asking about. I'm sorry for boring everybody with my own.
No, not at all. It's very much along those lines. I think a lot of it was just kind of curious on how to encourage or at least ignite the interest in spectroscopy.
Oh, in spectroscopy itself, it's hard to do. I think with the sun, it's really hard to do. The best you can do is with colors. I've struggled. I've got I bought a prism here out of plastic that I thought would, be helpful to show the rainbow, and you can do that kind of thing. Interesting thing, by the way, I had to pull it from my show. I just didn't have enough time to include it. But for a while, I was I had a photo. As it turns out, our eye gets worse as we age, as many of us know. And we lose the purple blue. And so if you were to just take a prism and show the spectrum on a white refrigerator or a white wall, the frustrating thing is, for those of you who are older like me, if you ask your grandchild or your niece or nephew how far into the blue purple they can see, point to it, they'll be pointing to a place you're not seeing any light at all. I mean, because your vision is just lost in the blue. So the cool thing is, am I sharing my screen now? Good, I'm not. There was an artist called Monet that some of you may be familiar with, who did this painting, which came up on my screen along with other things. It's on Etsy. No wonder there are things that I'm glad I wasn't sharing my screen. It's not me, honestly, it wasn't me. It's just, that's what Google decided to show me. Okay, so let me share my screen here just to show you, because this is pretty cool to see. Again, this isn't answering your question, Dawn. It's just more sort of fun stuff. There's my screen. So this is Monet's water lilies. He has, this isn't the exact image I wanted to show you. He's got blue water lilies here, I guess. And the thing is that the humans who looked at the scene he painted didn't see any blue water lilies at all. And what the issue was he had his lens, which is what gets cloudy and eliminates blue as we age, had been removed from his eye. He had had some problem with his eye. And so he didn't have a lens. Somehow there's a way that you still can see stuff. I don't understand the science or optics behind that. And so he was able to see blue colors that nobody else was able to see because he had no lens interfering with the light coming into his eyes. Anyway, I don't have many other examples. If you're in a classroom, on the other hand, there's all sorts of fun things that you can do. And one of which is, depending on the age of the kids, is you can get these spectrum glasses. Sounds like you're familiar, looks like you're familiar with them. You've seen them, Dawn?
Yes, I have several of them, including, I actually use the small, almost like the slide.
Right. My experience has been with the slide, there can be lots of challenges of them trying to find the thing. And that's where, again, just for completeness, that's not what we want to look at, but that is. There we go. In fact, that isn't what, this is another product. I give it away for free. If you're interested in measuring the sun's magnetism, talk to me later. It's not something I sell though. This is that little spectrometer that I sell to mostly high school, not elementary or middle school kids. You aim this at a gas tube. It's a lot to carry around. But I've gone to lots of education conferences. I mean, we've done dozens and dozens of booths at the AAS, at the NSTA, at the AAPT, if you're familiar with any of those organizations, and asked lots of teachers about using those slides. And I imagine your experience with the handheld slide isn't all that different than theirs, and that is it can be often quite challenging for the students to find the spectrum. So one thing you can do if you care to, and here I'm in selling mode, is you can look at using our spectrometer, if I can show it to you here again, our little spectrometer and gas tubes. You can go, the cool thing is, if you build spectroscopy into an outreach project that you're doing, If you go to a school, do the night thing, do the moon, do all the Saturn and Jupiter and all that. But if you also have a daytime activity, like with these solar telescopes that you've got, if you went into a classroom, it's not cheap. And again, I'm sorry that it happens to be something that I sell, because my words should be considered a little tainted by that. But if you go into a classroom with one of these tripod mounted cameras and some sort of gas tube, and ask me, in private, and I'll tell you where you get them and so forth, you can actually now go to a chemistry or a physics teacher and say, I'm going to show your students spectra, or astronomy teacher. And spectra, it's interesting, physics teachers may cover it because, it's a topic, but physics teachers have so much to discuss that sometimes they don't have the time for it. Whereas chemistry teachers don't have any choice but to teach spectra, because the transitions are so intrinsic to the whole field of chemistry. So you could go in, honestly, if you had the time, and this may be the biggest draw of everything I've said tonight, if you're looking for something to do in outreach, look at our spectrometer, the little tripod thing and gas tubes. It's going to cost you about $500. And then go into classrooms, put together, and I love coaching people on this, and show students to start with the glasses. Those are cool. But the cool thing about being able to project it on an overhead, now you need an overhead projector too, and a laptop, is everybody sees the same thing at the same time. Everybody's going to see those lines that you can see there in that image, and they really get it. So anyway, that's the site for all that, is this fieldtestedsystems.com. It's a little different. And again, my enthusiasm isn't because I want to fleece you or make money. It's because it can be, there's a gas tube, there's a spectrum, there's the peak. And check, if nothing else, check this video out to see how I teach spectra in a classroom. It can be real effective. Okay, I'll shut the flock up now. Other questions?
I think wearing the clown hair also helps.
What else? Anything? Whew, I'm off the hook. I can go up and get dinner. Listen, thank you all. I hope to hear from you. I'm always happy. I love the topic. I love answering questions. Thanks for your outreach. I hope actually some of you, I'll see you at the Star Party, Texas Star Party. Not this year, I think.
Possibly.
Yeah, I'd love to see you there. I'm also planning, I was going to be at Okie-Tex last fall. The thing is, the talks I give there will be pretty similar, very, very close to this talk. So the deal is, like when there's a comedian, like Borscht Belt comedian or TV comedian, and you see them give their talk, and in the middle of their routine, they're going, oh yeah, I mentioned, you don't want to go and hear them the next night, because everything that looks so spontaneous, even that, I want to mention, is going to be mostly the same. So this is spontaneous. I like to dice it up a little bit, but all the same, it's the same talk. I hope to see you there. Or if any of you haven't been to NEAF in New Jersey, Dawn is looking like either she's been or she really wants to go. You too, Brian.
Only the virtual last year.
Virtual, yeah. It's better than nothing. Come to NEAF. Come to NEAF. It's the best thing. You'll see all of the vendors there. It will blow your mind. It really will. You do have to suffer for New Jersey and New York. I grew up there, so I can throw them under the bus. But it's a wonderful conference. I doubt this year's will happen even, but the following year should be huge. So come to my booth and say hello.
Nice.
And listen.
Before you go, I was just thinking about those handheld plastic spectroscopes. The little, I have one, it's packed away from my move, but yeah, there you go. Yes.
These are sort of cool too. It's a private experience. You've got to get the angles right. And I'll tell you the biggest problem as a teacher for these is if you've got old eyes, you need bifocals to make this work. And now you're all doing all sorts of weird bifocal tricks. I can't read the scale on it. These are pretty inexpensive though. They're $3-4. I've asked, I think I've probably asked 1,000 teachers how they're teaching spectroscopy while standing at my booth. Literally 1,000, maybe 2 or 3 times that number. I was nervous at first, but now they say, oh yeah, we use the slides. And then I say to them, Dawn, this is where I was coming from. And then I'll say to them, now with as straight a face as I can, how's that working out for you? And that's where you get like, it's really funny. All the nonverbal, you see teachers elbowing their colleagues next to them, and you see people laughing.
Well, I will play devil's advocate as someone who teaches astronomy to young kids, and especially to scouts, and especially to youth that are, no pun intended, totally intended, on the spectrum. Sometimes wearing things on their face is uncomfortable, so having the handheld small slide pieces does make it a bit more comfortable for them. So I tend to keep both as an option.
That makes total sense. I hadn't thought about that at all. There's certainly, I'm not as experienced in the classroom as you are, but I pretend I am.
You do tend to lose the glasses less because the slides can fall. However, the slides also seem a little bit more durable, whereas the glasses can bend, and the actual spectral pieces can warp a bit. But we were in outreach, so we're not expecting these objects and these equipment pieces to be pristine condition even after the first use.
Sure, that makes all the sense in the world. I wish I had other examples. When you're going into higher end classrooms, the poster which I showed earlier is, teachers really love that poster, and for good reason.
I was going to show you, Tom. Check it out. I have I don't know if you guys can see. I collect elements, periodic table elements.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and I'm totally digging that poster. I'm absolutely gotta get it as a companion for these guys. Magnesium. Yep. Anyway.
I mean, I was actually introduced to Spectra back in high school, and I don't think they would allow this much anymore in current school classrooms, but our science teacher actually, had us taking individual elements and, burning them in Bunsen burners and then looking at them through those sort of black plastic spectrometers.
Yeah.
Well, so if you can get away with that, that's a really great way, to show it physically, because they're not only seeing the light change in the fire without the spectral glass, but you can see how that spectrum breaks down. And of course, we can do that with the spectral tubes. Those are just a lot more fragile, and they're a lot more pricey.
Yeah, since you're speaking of spectral tubes, I'll show you this product, which I don't sell either. This is a carousel. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Not a carousel.
This is mind blowing. I used to show it at my booth, but then people were ending up saving their money to buy one of these instead of my stuff. So, truth be known, I don't demonstrate with this anymore. Really,
I shouldn't tell you I'm adding one to my Amazon cart right now.
So this is a cool device because gas tubes are cassettes. The reason gas tubes like the one I showed you earlier are a pain in the neck is, as you no doubt know, they have a duty cycle of about 30 seconds. They're really hot. They're a hassle to change, and they die. And the reason they die is because air infiltrates through the wire that goes through the glass, through that hole.
Oh, wow.
This device, these are completely sealed. They inductively couple internally here. And so I've left them on overnight. And the cool thing is you can rotate it to different elements. So the switch, and this is durable. You can just carry this thing around. If you want to buy one, again, we're losing a lot of people who aren't educators. Contact me at Arbor Scientific is where I'd recommend you buy everything. Good vendor, but they're all the same. They're made by the same company.
What is it called again?
This is called a
Spectrum Tube Carousel.
Spectrum Carousel.
I'm on their website right now, and it's like, ooh, your RSpec classroom spectrometer is actually less expensive, so there's a bonus for you there.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I wanted to brag about this poster and maybe just to entertain everybody. This story here. He's now got the poster hanging in his office. So this is on the street outside a talk he gave. This is the second time I met him, and he came out at like midnight. He was doing a meet and greet. We calculate, not that it matters. He's a great guy. We calculate he probably makes 100,000 a week when he's traveling. I mean, because he fills these halls with, a couple thousand people. But he came out, and there are like 6 or 8 of us behind a Jersey barrier. They wouldn't let us get close to him this year. And, he looks over and, well, Dr. Tyson, we're yelling. He's tired. He wants to go to his limo. And I've got the poster hanging out over the Jersey barrier. And so he's, people call him over. So he's sort of coming over and he looks up at the poster and he goes, wow, that's brilliant. Brilliant. Why hasn't anybody thought of that before? And I'm going, ding. And then his next line is, can I have one? It's like, yeah, I bought 2 in a poster tube. Here it is. It's got my business card inside of it with special non-mar tape that my wife, business partner, had carefully gotten. We're ready. I never heard back from him. Bupkis. I'm thinking, come on, Dr. Tyson, at least, and so now I'm thinking, suppose, some people think about winning the lottery. So I'm thinking, suppose I get a phone call, Tom, this is Dr. Tyson, Neil Tyson, I love the work you're doing. Because the year before I'd shown him samples of the sort I showed you in my talk, and he got all excited. I mean, really, he's from down there in Texas. He went to school down there, as some of you may know. And he said to me, he asked me a question, a typical Texas question I'd never heard asked before, certainly not in this context. I've been telling him quasars and stuff. And he said, meanwhile, there's all these people queued up who are having him sign the programs. And as soon as I start talking science, he just drops them. I mean, he's like signing stuff while he's talking to me. So he says to me, what are you packing? I go, what? What are you packing? I said, pardon me? He said, what kind of aperture are you using? So I told him 8 inches and stuff. But so he went with the poster. I did say to him, and it turns out he was visiting for 2 nights. But coincidentally, I was going to be out at a high school with one of these solar telescopes the next day. And so I said to him, just on a lark, I said, hey, Dr. Tyson, I'm going out to an underprivileged school tomorrow, which it was, with a solar hydrogen alpha telescope. Do you want to join me? So, he actually didn't say no. He stopped. He was thinking. And either he's really polite or he was telling the truth. He said, I'm all booked up tomorrow. My dance plate is full. He was going to be in town. And as it turns out, the following day after that, I heard he spent the whole day with the Seattle Seahawks talking physics. So I think he probably was booked. Can you imagine if he'd said yes, the next question would have been, do you want to pick me up in your limo or should I pick you up in my 2002 Legacy station wagon? Either way, it's fine with me. So, and also there's the poster up in the Sophia Boeing, which is sort of fun to see. Anyway, listen, thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for doing the outreach that you're doing, Dawn, and the rest of you. Thanks for hopefully enjoying yourself tonight. And I'm just looking for a way to stop everything. Have a great evening and keep in touch. Let me know how I can help in any way. Okay?
Thank you, Tom. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
That's an awesome poster. I bought one from him while I was in Casper, Wyoming in 2017, and it's rolled up in my bedroom. It needs to be taken out somewhere and stuck up on a wall. It's laminated. I mean, it could rain on it.
Did you buy it from him personally?
Yes.
Okay.
I ran into him up there because I could hear him down at the end. Remember, we were looking at some kind of a dome. A guy sells domes, and I overheard his voice about 5 booths down. And I went down there to see him.
Well, okay. We haven't got anything else. Any questions? Did Mike sign off? Looks like. Okay. So yeah, we really should get Steve Ramsden sometime. Probably the most dedicated outreach person I think I've ever met. So be great to have him. Okay. Well, thanks. We had a really good turnout tonight. I saw it get up to about 45 here, and I don't know how many were in the YouTube. But,
7.
Okay, so close to 50 people.
Yep.
Pretty good night for us. So I guess we'll see everybody again in February. Does anybody remember off the top of your head what the topic was? Sorry, I can't.
I'm going to show up and see what it is.
Okay. We'll be there. So everybody have a good evening, and we'll see you later.
Night.
Night, everybody.